Okay, we will call to order the November 9th, 2023 Bexley Architectural Review Board meeting. Can we have the roll called? Are you going to do that, Karen?
Sure.
Since Kathy's out today.
Mr. Steele? Here. Mr. Hall? Here. Mr. Heyer?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Here.
Chairperson Tony?
Here. Next, we will have approval of meeting minutes, and we have we have 2 meeting minutes to approve. We can do them both together, or we can do them separate. Did everybody get a chance to review both meeting minutes? Mr.
Yes.
Scott, did you get a chance?
Yes.
Okay. If you're okay, then we will just approve them together.
It's fine with me.
Okay. Do I have some that will make a motion?
So moved, Scott.
Second.
Okay, and we can call the roll on that.
Mr. Heyer?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
And Tony?
Yes. Okay, this is the time in the meeting for public comment. If there is someone in the audience that would like to speak to the board on a topic that is not on the agenda tonight, you can come forward and we will try to answer your question, or if you have something that you wanted to talk about that is on the agenda, we will wait and do that when we come to that item in the agenda. Is there anybody that wants to bring up a new topic to talk about? Okay, seeing none. We have one item on the agenda that we all agreed could go on consent. So we will do a vote for this application number ARB 23-38. The address is 358 North Cassidy. The applicant is Amy Lauerhouse. The owner is Bruce and Michelle Carter. Is there anyone in the audience that came to speak about that application? Okay, seeing no one for that one. Do I have a board member that will make a motion for that application?
So moved. Higher. Second, Scott.
Call the roll.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Heyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Madam Tony?
Yes. Okay, that brings us to old business. Our first and only old business item tonight is application BZAP 23-23. The address is 2200 East Main Street. The applicant is Ryan Pearson. The owner is Continental Real Estate Companies. The applicant is seeking a recommendation to the Board of Zoning and Planning for a certificate of appropriateness to allow demo and redevelopment of the vacant Trinity Lutheran apartment structures at 2160 East Main Street. Also, a special permit and conditional use for a new 5-story building with housing alternatives and variance for a new 5-story mixed use building to provide additional housing, restaurant, retail, and offices. Okay, so we will start with Karen. She can give us an update.
Okay, I did put a pretty lengthy, sorry, we're gonna make sure your microphone's on. Just bad example. I did a pretty lengthy staff report that was posted to the website today, so I'm hoping most everyone got a chance to look at that, but I'm gonna give a summary of it. I did give a little history of where we've been with this project. I don't think I need to go into the details here, but just the timeline that this project went to BZAP, just to have a preliminary review with no decisions, just to kind of confirm zoning or special permits. I will put in here that since that time, the applicant has added a 6-story, which will now need a variance. For those of you, I'm going to jump around a little bit, but for those of you that were able to attend the workshop, that was actually something that we encouraged them to do. Doesn't mean that we won't have audience members that may want to testify, but it is something that we highly encourage them to do so that we could get some setback and some relief off of some of the massing in the back of the building, which is part of this new application. The next step was taking it to the September ARB meeting. We had some good discussion, a lot of testimony. With that feedback, the applicant decided to table their application for the October ARB meeting. We won't be hearing it in BZAP until it has a final recommendation, positive or negative, to BZAP, which that's why we're here today for a recommendation to BZAP. But in between, the applicant decided to ask for a tabling And we offered, which actually came out of the last ARB meeting, to do a workshop. It was a non-public comment, but public were welcome. I see a lot of faces that actually weren't here. We sat around the table, rolled up our sleeves, and got a lot of design feedback from the board. As Madam Tony always says, you can get like 4 meetings worth of work done in one workshop, and I think it was very productive. Never going to please everybody, but I think we accomplished a lot of the goals that we were hoping to accomplish. Some of which I'll just kind of go through them a little bit, but I'm going to give the applicant a chance to kind of spot through the changes, and we can look at some images. Some additional images did come in today. They aren't any changes. Are you having trouble hearing?
Is it on?
It is on, but it does not seem to work. You get another one?
Well, it's next speaker.
One works. I'll just hit on some of the highlights that we were looking for at the workshop. And I think that a lot of these were accomplished. I'm not that there's not still some work to do, but I'm from a staff perspective, pretty pleased at the changes that have come in. The applicant was able to break down some of the back of the building. Because I'm flying kind of just with Catherine tonight, I'm going to bring up the images afterwards. So you'll just have to listen to the verbal explanation right now. But some of the back was notched out to give it some relief in the massing for neighbors to the back and to the west, and for City Hall and Bexley Center. That was able to be accomplished by the addition of the sixth story that's in the front of the building. So it will only affect Main Street, which according to Main Street guidelines is encouraged to add some density to Main Street. We also encouraged the applicant to make more ins and outs of the building, undulation of the facades all over, so that would give it some relief with the mass that it is. I think that's been done pretty well. Some pocket parks were created. We'll go through all of this, but I just want to hit on the highlights. And the entry space was really carved out in the front of the building to make a public space that will be part of the restaurant, but also a really nice public space for gathering, as well as the corner, the southeast corner. There has been a very nice development of the kind of the corner where there's now a right turnout to activate the space on Main Street, so that it will have much more public interaction. And I don't have any idea, and I don't know that the applicant is in the position to even know himself yet, or themselves yet, but there also was added a couple retail spaces. So we highly encourage them to put not just an office space, but something that will activate Main Street as well. So when you see retail, I'm not sure if you're in a position yet to divulge what that will be, but we know that Hudson 29 was proposed on one corner, and now there's retail on the other corner as well to activate it with Bexley Center, which I think is a really great change. I really, just to go through, because there may be some new people in the audience, I just want to be clear about what we are here to discuss at ARB and what we're not here to discuss. I know I did this last time, but I'm just going to run through the list. We are here to talk about the architecture, material choices, and style. We're here to talk about how the building, through its architecture, addresses Main Street corridor. We're here to talk about how the building activates spaces around the building and with other neighboring properties, and how the architecture and building design interface with adjacent properties, such as the Alexander and the neighbors to the back and to City Hall and across the street. As well as pedestrians. So materials and detailing of the building are all fair game. What we're not here to discuss is parking and traffic patterns. That will be dealt with. It is actually already being dealt with, and we can address whatever global questions you have, but I can assure you that currently the planners on the project from the Continental team has been constantly meeting with Jason Sudi and the mayor to deal with parking and traffic issues as the building changes and gets molded in different ways. Tax abatements are not part of our discussion. The use really isn't either. I know that I've heard a lot that why are there so many units? They could have a smaller building, but this is within the zoning code, so that's not really here. We're not here to discuss that. And site design, overall site design, that is also in the purview of BZAP as well as general massing. A lot of that is squishy. You know, the architecture can change what appears to be a very large general mass into a much more sensitive mass to its neighbors, which I think we're definitely on the way to. The applicant has been very receptive to a lot of the changes, and I think you'll see them in the presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and ask, I don't know who on your team wants to present, but I have, just so the audience knows, you will see some drawings now that you may not have seen yet. They're nothing new. They're just additional renderings that came in today. I think they'll be helpful. For example, one of the west elevation, Scott or whoever's going to present can explain them, but if you want to come up and we'll swear you in, whoever's going to present.
Good evening. Jason Hockstock, Continental Real Estate, 150 East Broad Street, Columbus, 43215. I just want to lead off and thank everybody for their time over the last couple of months working through this. I know it's been a long process, but I think ultimately this will be a great project. I'd be remiss to say Frank wanted me to make sure apologize. He could not make it tonight. He had a conflicting meeting in Pittsburgh. So unfortunately, you got me as a representative at this point. But I think ultimately what you're going to find is a great project that matches up with the discussions we've had over the last couple of months. I think that workshop was ideal to hammer out the issues and really address some of the concerns that have been raised here and by the neighbors. With that, I'm going to turn it over to PH7 and let them talk through the architecture on the project. Thanks.
Thank you. One more thing before we start, because I would be remiss, because I usually do, to not give my staff recommendation up front, just so you have things to think about while we're going. My staff recommendation would be to recommend this to BZAP, but the reason I wanted to point that out is along the way, I want you to be thinking about what kinds of things we might want to remand back if we do go ahead and move it on to BZAP for approval. For example, just some material samples or maybe it's nothing, but I want to be cognizant that could very well be part of the approval, is that certain things might come back to us for final approval.
Okay. Thanks.
You're still struggling to hear?
If everyone could speak really loud because it's on, so.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening. My name is Brad Pauling. I'm the studio director at PH7, and I've been working behind the scenes with Scott and Mike Healy from day one on this. And so I thought I would just go through a few of the slides and talk through some of the changes. And we've got Ryan Pearson with the Edge Group here as well to help if there's any questions on that front. But we just wanted to hit some high level stuff. I don't think there's a lot of different things that you see here from the work session, but in case there's people that weren't a part of the work session, we wanted to walk through those changes, because what is on the screen here today, I think, is dramatically different than what was in front of you for the ARB previously.
2 months ago.
Yes. And so I just kind of want to walk through how we got to where we are, in addition to the discussions that we had with this group during the work session. So with further ado, if you want to slide to the next one, I'll go ahead and just walk through some of the process and some of the high level points. Yes.
If you want any of those individual sheets.
Okay. We'll start here. This is good enough. Just real quick, for the group, this is what's called a NOLI plan. And so this is a figure ground of your Main Street corridor, looking at both the north and the south side of the street, basically from Parkview Avenue all the way up to Cassidy. And so what you're seeing is what the figure ground of the building's frontages along that entire streetscape is. And then we tried to do a study. We tried to just sort of point out what are the building masses on Main Street and how those buildings are starting to reflect your Main Street guidelines. We had studied this long ago. This was not in our packet for the original ARB. We did present this during the work session. And so we just wanted to just point out to, it's a way of us sort of describing what's going on. And in particular, you start to look at some of these red dots on this, and those are sort of negative spaces along the Main Street corridor that act as either moments for the frontage of a building or for a patio that is a part of a space, or just generally something along the way. But what you start to see in this is a rhythm and a pattern. And if you go to the next slide, we looked really more closely at just Parkview to the Drexel Avenue, and you see us trying to understand what are the rhythms that are happening along Main Street and proportions specifically as related to sort of the pedestrian way. Like, so when you're on Main Street, you're interacting with the buildings that are generally 2 and 3 stories in height. And so what we have tried to do in our revisions and what we have in front of you today is really reflect that in the front of the building. And so in some of these renderings, you'll start to see, and I want you to really sort of understand that the front of the building is a 2-story facade, and we're trying to step it back as much as we can to create depth. And but at the end of the day, that mass and the proportion of that mass on Main Street is pretty reflective of what you see going up and down your street. It creates a rhythm, it creates a pattern that we think is pretty indicative of the Main Street guidelines. Next page. This is overall site plan. I'll actually, we'll come back to it and let Ryan kind of speak to this in a minute. But I would like to go forward a couple of slides, go 1 and then 2, and we'll come back. That sound good? Okay.
I'm afraid if I turn left.
Gonna go all off? Okay. I'll try to point on that one so that everybody can see. I do have a pointer. So this is Main Street elevation. What you see in this image is Parkview, and it's basically to the left. And as you go up the street, the parking lot and City Hall right behind us. And so what we've really tried to do is to do a couple things. One is to simplify the massing, simplify the materiality. And by doing so, basically, we've created 2 sort of 2-story facades along Main Street. You got one here and you have one here. And these elements create what we're calling that sort of pedestrian way, or the pedestrian scale of your streetscape. And then in doing so, I know one of the comments from before was, is this a mid-block building or is this a corner building? What I think the intent of that comment is we were really sort of celebrating corners in the last concept. And in this design, we've really sort of turned things inward. And what we created is an entry sequence for multiple things. So we have a 1-story restaurant here that's sort of under this blue canopy you see, and then it returns back in. And then we get a really interesting little corner, sort of inner courtyard piece that sort of allows the streetscape to sort of pop in and out. But on the other side, we have basically retail on the other side. It's divided in half. We actually have the opportunity for entry here into a retail space, and then have a separate entry on the other side. Because of topography, there's some changes that occur as the building sort of steps down the hill. But this interaction in this little area right here really creates kind of an interesting dynamic of confluence. And so you've got office and space on the second floor that has to enter into the building. You got retail that has to enter into the building. At the same time, you've got this dialogue that happens across this. So as a moment of sort of connection and so forth, it really can happen quite well there. The other piece you see on this facade is basically just simplification of the masses. So by carving and taking this part of the building away, we've actually introduced a rooftop patio for the multifamily. And so their clubhouse features here on the 3rd floor on this corner, and then opens out onto a large space. So again, activity, there's vibrancy on that rooftop that allows it allows light to carve back in here. It erodes what's happening along Main Street, but more importantly, provides a moment on that can sort of continue to activate. So we think that those couple moves help to simplify the massing on the front and really sort of follow that rhythm of Main Street. So if you want to flip, I'll just do a couple other quick things. I think in this image, you can start to see what we mean by activating the streetscape and sort of creating that pedestrian scale. There's a limitless number of opportunities for what's going on here along this street. And so reflecting, engaging with it, but allowing it to be a continuation of sort of your streetscapes. Next slide. Just another little bit of a closer up slide of the hierarchy of this, but I think one of the comments we heard, and I hope we feel like we're being pretty successful at it, is simplifying the hierarchy. So what we have is basically two masses that are brick facades and then erode the top a little bit by changing materiality. And that vocabulary then turns the corner and starts to become a rhythm for the rest of the building. So rather than it being more haphazard use of material on a facade, this is something that is, block of a building. I think one of the comments we've had a couple times was what makes this uniquely Bexley and what can make it uniquely Bexley. I think that starting to have an identity of its own that doesn't share an identity with something else, I think is what we think makes sense. And I think these things along the streetscape also tie it into what, what's happening in your community. So next slide. This is just a close up of that little space we were talking about. You can kind of see potential outdoor dining. You've got potential entry into another retail space. So you've got this sort of confluence and this crossing of different things happening. You can go to the next slide if you want. This is looking at the other corner. So as we move up the streetscape, this is the parking lot here that we're adjacent to. And what we've sort of started to develop here is a public node. I know Ryan can speak a little more about it, but we don't exactly know what this is yet. But what we're sort of indicating is that this is the termination of a pedestrian connection all the way up to Bryden Road. And so there's a cross connection through the city that terminates at this location. So maybe you can start to solve some of the challenges of the parking lot here, but definitely can activate this corner in a way that we think can be really, really successful. The other thing that's interesting in this slide is part of this discussion about a sixth floor. In this slide, you can see it a little better. What we were able to do by carving out this is, we removed several units in this here, and we've basically taken a piece of the cake and placed it up on top. And so we would call this a partial sixth floor. We don't want it to be confused that this is the entirety of the building. We're really only talking about a sixth floor that's right here. And what's interesting about it is obviously there's a staircase on this side of the building. There's a staircase on the other side of the building. We've got central core circulation, but we can't just do 4 units on the top. We really needed to stretch it across the building in order to connect it from vertical circulation to vertical circulation. So, but partial sixth floor gives us the ability to create that really interesting Main Street facade. So if you just flip through, maybe the next thing is just starting to look at the side a little more. One of the comments I know we received was talking a lot about the cornice and how do we deal with the cornice of the brick building, the roof line of the piece above that's sort of that gray material. So we really sort of flipped it. I think in our first concept, we were doing a much heavier roof line at the top and a much more subdued cornice for the brick. And here we've kind of, I think with at the recommendation of the board here, we did flip that. We think it does work out and be quite successful, we think. So you can start to see the rhythm of the building as it moves back. Again, creating more vertical chunks of a building that are more uniform in their materiality, not nearly as haphazard. So the next couple things, just kind of moving around the building, simplifying the hierarchy. You can kind of see it as you move along. And then the last thing on this piece would be, again, an erosion of this back corner. And so by changing the scale back down to a 2-story facade on the corner here, what it does is it allows there to be a little more transparency through the corners. It makes the building seem a little less massive in size because we're kind of pulling these corners back. but it also creates opportunity. These are obviously, we could potentially have roof terraces here for these apartments. So we can turn that into amenity space that for those apartments, it works out quite well. It allows us to also change materiality. I know one of the comments was, how do we make this back of the building a little quieter? How do we change the vocabulary as we turn towards the residential neighborhood? We think that creating a two-story piece allows us to change that scale, allows us to speak in a different language as we kind of go around the side. So obviously eager to hear your feedback on that. But if you keep going, I think we're getting close to what I wanted to share. We certainly want to let you guys speak, let you ask questions, and we're here to answer them. So I don't know if there's anything else on the site that I really want to go into. I think unless you feel like there is. We're here. We'll answer questions if we need them. So
Thank you. Okay, we will go next to the public. Can I just have a show of hands of how many people would like to speak tonight? 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so it looks like we've got 7 or 8 people that might want to spot. Okay, so you can come up one at a time. Actually, you want to swear them all in together? Okay, so anybody who wants to speak, please stand up and we will swear you all in at one time to make it go quickly.
If you'd raise your right hand, do you swear that your testimony tonight will be the truth and nothing but the truth? Say, I do. Thank you. And when you come up to the lectern, if you would just identify your name and your address. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and give everybody 3 minutes to talk, and we would just ask that you just not repeat what everyone has said before you. So, if you would just come up one at a time, and we'll give your name and address, and then just please tell us your thoughts. So whoever would like to go first.
I love public speaking, so I'll just get this out of the way.
And please, if you would push the
Yes.
microphone down so you can really.
I better hold it because I'm so short. Good evening. My name is Lynn Jeffrey, and I've lived in Bexley for almost my entire life, which, as you can tell, is a very long time. I've watched the city grow and seen firsthand the pride that people have in their homes and neighborhoods. In 2009, I purchased a unit on the northeast corner at the Alexander. I've enjoyed living there for over 14 years. I'm here this evening to address the height, mass, and scale of the proposed development. And I understand that's not exactly building materials, but hopefully you'll see where I'm going. Under the Bexley City Code, the ARB is charged with maintaining building scale appropriate to the neighborhood and ensuring the compatibility of new development with existing neighborhood uses. What does compatibility mean? According to the American Planning Association, it is the characteristics of different uses, activities, or design which will allow them to be located near each other in harmony. Characteristics of compatibility include height, scale, mass, and bulk. Compatibility does not mean the same as, but rather refers to the sensitivity in maintaining the character of the existing development or area. To address the compatibility issues, at the ARB work session with the developer a few weeks ago, one member of the ARB specifically asked numerous times for a rendering showing the mass of the building compared to the single-family homes on Parkview and Brighton. To the best of our knowledge, this has not been submitted for review by the board or the community, nor have renderings been submitted showing the building from the northwest corner, although you mentioned today that they had maybe been popped up, but I was busy all day, so I apologize that I've not seen those. The ARB cannot completely review or approve compatibility of structure and architecture of a proposed building without all of the pertinent information. The height, scale, and mass of the development is complete opposite of harmony and compatibility for our neighborhood. It simply is not compatible with the single-family homes, the Alexander, or the Parkview Arms. We all share our small west central corner of Bexley in the streets of Maine, Parkview, Columbia, and Brighton. A building with more than 230 rental apartments and a public parking garage of 300 plus spaces does not share a community, but rather takes over the neighborhood. Variances are granted to allow projects to deviate from the standard of the building code in some way. While the city code allows for variances, the variances granted must still be compatible with the neighborhood and follow the laws provided for variances. Per section 1254.14 Main Street District Special Permits states special permits to allow the maximum height of a structure up to 5 stories or up to 7 stories west of Sheridan and south of Main. There simply is not a special permit or variance code to allow for a structure with a partial 6th floor story on this parcel of land. Many people have said we must have realized that it would be redeveloped someday. And I say to them that back in 2009, when Trinity Lutheran was in full swing, is that my time? What would have made us think it would be developed someday? And let me be clear, I am not against development. I'm but simply very much against this particular concept, which, as the old saying goes, appears to be trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. What has been submitted for review and approval, which again is not a complete set of renderings, is clearly a case of conflicting land uses, including mismatched density, height, mass, and layout, and does not meet the standard for an affirmative recommendation to the BZAC. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person that would like to speak, please come forward.
My name is Marcia Hirsch. I live at 500 South Parkview. My husband and I moved to Bexley in 2021 to be near family. We purchased a unit in the Alexander, and we have enjoyed living here in this beautiful and harmonious community where properties continue to hold their real estate values. I have learned that under the Bexley City Code, the Architectural Review Board has the responsibility to protect real estate within the city from impairment or destruction of value. I cannot see how this proposed redevelopment at 2200 East Main can do other than devalue my property and that of others. The size of this proposed building will mean a loss of privacy, a loss of peaceful views of the sunrise, daylight, trees, and will be replaced with a massive 6-story wall with with views of the public parking garage from a 2-lane public road on the west side of the building. How can this building as proposed not contribute to devaluation of our real estate? If I were looking to purchase property in Bexley now, I would not want to buy a unit in my building. The scope and design of this proposed project will radically alter the character and value of neighboring residential properties. I ask you to consider my comments and your responsibility to protect Bexley real estate and not approve this project.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to offer comments on the proposed development of the Trinity Apartments.
Can we have your name and address, please?
Coming.
Thank you.
I am Maria Rosenthal. Me and my husband live on 500 South Parkview at the Alexander. My property abuts the Trinity parcel. I have studied the latest iteration of the proposed development. While the renderings provide multiple views of the South View, Main Street, the east facing City Hall and Bexley Square, and the north sides of the building, there is only one image as of when we got the information, not today. One page of the west elevation, and this without any detail or views to and from adjacent properties. Still, I can visualize from the page that this is a massive 5- and 6-story continuous with blocks, which blocks sunlight from anything to the west, is immediately adjacent to my windows and balcony, and will directly impact my access to daylight and views. We are all aware of the importance of daylight on the health and welfare of everyone. The Main Street Development Guidelines note the need for high quality of life, and the design, location, and appearance of Main Street and all its architectural elements affect the community's quality of life. The Main Street Guidelines note that 3 to 4 stories is ideal. We could understand some portions of the building to be at 5, given the need for density, but 6 stories, only a few dozen feet from our home, is not in alignment with the Main Street Guidelines and with Bexley long-range planning goals. Architects are licensed to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and to shield consumers from unqualified practitioners. I and my neighbors request adjustments to provide relief and daylight to protect our welfare and enhance our community. Under the Bexley City Code, the ARB was established to preserve and enhance the existing character of residential neighborhoods. I have a number of questions which I don't think have been answered. How does the proposed design preserve or enhance the character of the neighboring residential properties? Do the quality and type of materials complement neighboring properties? Does the building consist of 4-sided architecture, or is it the design diminished at the north and west of the building? What is the lighting plan for the building, particularly on its north and west sides? How does the design mitigate negative environmental effects of the proposed uses, including a public parking garage, in terms of noise, vibration, dust, and loss of privacy on adjacent residential properties? We need these questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please.
John Roush, 500 South Parkview Avenue. John Roush, 500 South Parkview Avenue, in the Alexander. Most of what I had planned to say, you've asked me not to duplicate, so I won't. What I have to say is that the proposed development does not preserve the character of Main Street in Bexley. Bexley's Main Street is a historical small town environment, and there are several historical buildings within 2 blocks of the proposed building, the proposed development, and it would be the most massive building for miles around, resembling multiple big box stores stacked on one top on one another. Even with external modifications, it is still a 5/1 or a 5 podium construction, like hundreds of massive multi-use buildings that are commonly known as stick-built or wood frame construction, built on top of a level concrete and steel podium. There's no other buildings like this built in Bexley anywhere that I'm aware of. They only exist out in areas where there are large, clear areas where these buildings can be built on flat ground without excavating a huge amount of soil from the site. They cost anywhere from 30 to 40% less to build than steel and concrete buildings. I don't believe Continental has shown any consideration for the historical preservation of Bexley's Main Street. Within the mixed-use zone, Bexley Gateway on the corner of Main and Parkview and the Alexander on Parkview are not modern buildings, and they are appropriate for Main Street design guidelines. They are modern versions of contemporary buildings that already exist in Bexley. The apartments south of Bryden are steel and concrete with solid brick exteriors. Even the Market District fits in well. It's, again, a contemporary version of the buildings that exist beyond, beyond the Drexel Theater and all the way down to the condo built by and lived in by Frank Cass at the corner of Main and Cassidy. There are very few exceptions. In closing, yesterday I was informed that the plan is to go forward with the positive recommendations to BZAP for approval of height variance and preliminary approval of design with remand to the ARB to refine details. Since I first became aware of this development, I have walked around Bexley stopping people on the street and asking them if they lived here and if they were aware of the project proposed for the Trinity site. Everyone was, and everyone was opposed to it. And I suggested that they attend these meetings. Their response was, why should I waste my time? It's a done deal. It certainly seems like it. Since yesterday and still this evening, I asked myself the same question, because it is going to go forward. Finally, I would encourage people who are interested in what 5/1 or 5 podium construction is to search for WOSU's public media 50-minute interview titled The Rise of 5/1 Apartment Buildings that was published only on September 21st and is available on the WOSU NPR site. It's a 50-minute long discussion with 5 architects and city planners about the problems that exist with 5/1 and 5 podium construction. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Roel Van Spransen, 530 South Parkview. I live in one of the brownstones. I do appreciate this slide. This picture here, right where this car is where my garage is. This is literally my view. And what I want to point out to the commission members is what this building is going to do. What you see here, all this sky will all be all in the building, occupied by the proposed building. This picture here, you can see that they have shut it up. So you still see skyline, right? So if you look down and up, you will see skyline. But for the people here in the Alexander, for the people here at the Park 3 residences, all the sky, all the trees will be all gone. Then we are looking indeed to a west elevation. The developer didn't provide us with any information about the west elevation, except now, tonight. It's not going to be very pleasant for us to look at this. And when my neighbors are saying, we're not going to see anything, this will all be gone. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Gross. I also live at 500 South Parkview. I just want to comment, you may not know that I spent 27 years of my life with the city of Bexley, 22 as a city attorney. I wrote most of the I wrote the ARB, the original ARB ordinance. What is really troubling to me, I called Karen on Saturday to observe that there were certain portions of the building which were not depicted. There were these side elevations, but there were no renderings. There was the southwest corner, the southeast corner, the northeast corner, nothing on the northwest corner. So tonight we come, and suddenly today we're filed renderings of those buildings. I don't see how you can expect. This is really, I want to be respectful, but this is very troubling to me that the public is invited to come to a meeting where there are renderings that were supplied today. How do you expect, if the public is to actually believe that their views count, please explain to me how getting them the day of the hearing for people to observe, absorb, talk about, is fair play. You're sending a very bad message to the folks who live here and pay taxes here and invest here. Please think about how you're doing this. It really pains me. And I respect you all in what you do, but this is not right.
Is there anyone else?
Good evening. Brittany Fortin, I live at 2201 Bryden Road, lifetime resident. Is it not on? It has a green light on.
You just have to just get it closer.
Well, I'm not sure how to get any closer to this. So Brittany Fortin, 2201 Bryden Road, lifetime resident of Bexley. What I just want to comment on is the size and scale of what I feel is a behemoth structure that will forever change the views of those that live on Bryden. It was nice to hear that in the front and on the northwest corner, there's some step back. Didn't hear anything about the other corner though. I was surprised when I went online myself trying to understand where the footprint is, trying to match it up with how tall the trees are that I have, how tall it is to my house, how close. And when I realized how close it is to the yard, trees aren't even going to block this. So to me, it is not just sight lines that'll be forever impacted. Full-grown trees will not block this. It takes years to even plant trees, which will never block the sight lines of what would be hundreds of now windows and prying eyes that essentially would be directed right into our windows. Appreciate the comment of saying, well, people bought this property. Yes, my parents bought this property more than 40 plus years ago. Do we think it's going to be developed into something that is 6 stories? No, right? The Main Street guidelines, and I am going to repeat this because I think it's important, state that it is what is ideal are 3 to 4 stories. Something that's 6 stories, this massive, I think is highly inappropriate for this area. The other aspect that concerns me greatly is the parking. So 320 parking spaces is what's proposed, or at least that's what I read. Not sure if that's what still stands. If there were 218 units, some quick math tells me that that's not adequate. Most apartments are going to have more than one of-age driver. Then you take into account 22,000 square feet of retail and office space. I do not understand how that is enough parking, which would be overflowing, I think, onto the streets of Parkview, Bryden, Columbia, Drexel. I would love to recommend an alternative. I think it should be within the 3 to 4 stories as a max. Or, to my knowledge, Central Bexley does not have a dedicated green space. There's dedicated green space in South Bexley. There's dedicated green space in North Bexley. I would love to see this area as a dedicated green space for Bexley. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, is there anyone else?
Jennifer Hirsch. I live at 2265 Bryden Road. Your name?
Your name?
Your name.
Modi.
Modi Hirsch. Where do you live? With me?
Yeah.
Okay. Me. Okay. All right. I appreciate the attempts made by the architectural firm to redesign the proposed large structure. The red brick adds charm, and the setback and tiers add much needed dimension, and the balconies give the building both a higher end feel and again dimension. However, I am struck by the quite contemporary facade, as noted, quite out of character for Bexley. Yes, there are other buildings on Main Street that lean towards contemporary architecture, but none of this massive size. The view from City Hall likewise is adorned in red brick, but we can note that but we note the view from the north almost what I entirely assume is cement board or hardy board and 9 garage doors. And from the west, a fair amount of brick is noted, but the overwhelming majority is again cement board and glass. This is the view of the residence of the Alexander. If you were to add a 2-story section anywhere, this would be the corner. But I am more troubled by the trees. There is still no attempt made to preserve the large trees lining Main Street, and a rather inadequate attempt to replace the greenery with 10 small trees in the front. Sorry, I'm on call. The east side has 2 medium trees and 7 trees or perhaps shrubs, 8 trees along the back or the north side, and the west has 6. A reminder that the proposal is to remove 50 well-established trees. And this is this is well within your purview, as the board may, as a condition of certificate of appropriateness for the project, require a plan for the preservation of existing trees and other significant landscape features. I am sure we agree that the current landscape is significant. What were you going to say, Modi? Speak for the trees.
I speak for the trees.
I'm not going to tell you what you're going to say.
The green Bexley trees that are going to be torn down. So please don't take them down.
I bought this house when I was pregnant with this child with intentions to stay here until I die. Indeed, I designed a house I can roll right in to the shower. But now I may have to stay simply because I can't sell or can't make my money back with any sort of reason. I'm worried about the density, the massiveness, the pollution. This space is supposed to be safe and lovely and warm for all of us. This is why we bought here. This building takes that away from us. Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, is there anyone else?
My name is Angela Yock. I live at 2240 Brighton Road. That's on the north side between Drexel and Columbia. I've spoken several times. Myself and Jenna have organized a West Bexley coalition to have our voices heard. I think up to this point, we've done a great job. I think originally this project probably would have been pushed through very quickly to make individuals in the city happy, as well as the developer. I am willing to take on the man because it's the right thing to do, and rules and guidelines and laws are for all to follow, not just the poor, but the rich as well. I'm going to ask again, like I did at another meeting, is there anyone here from Capital University? There has been so much emphasis on this project about how the city has to help save Capital University, that they're in such dire need for this money. What is more important, the university or its residents? Is there anyone here from City Council? I ask, why is this project so important to the mayor, to the council? Why are we asking for all these changes and approvals and requests, and we're just pushing it through? No one from any arm of the city government has reached out to our group. The only individuals they've talked to is the Alexander. This includes individuals in Columbia Place as a collective unit. It's individuals on Bryden Road, and especially those groups of homes that this will actually be up against. There's a lot of money on the line here. We are talking about a TIF. We're talking about another Continental project on Main Street for a tax abatement. There's a thing called a clawback, that if the revenue falls short, then Continental Realty has to reimburse Bexley. We keep on just giving away to individuals that want to develop. When are we going to stop? When are we going to have integrity? When are we going to stand up for what we believe in? Why did we buy in this community? Why do we have individuals that we want to raise in this community? Why do we want to go to Bexley schools? This is a community. It is not for sale. Do any of you live in West Bexley? I don't think so. Would you want this to be your neighbor? Would you want to see this every day? Would you want to deal with this traffic, the noise pollution? No. So why is West Bexley taking on the burden for Bexley? I am a divorced, stay-at-home parent with 2 kids. My house is my retirement. You are screwing with my future by approving this project. Are we going to get money back from the city for the loss of our values of our homes? No, that's not how this works. We are here to protect what we bought, our investments, our future. In closing, I'm just going to say this. On election day, I encourage residents to vote smartly. And that was entitled because the mayor and council representatives nominate individuals to boards such as this. Our government system in Bexley does not work. The mayor should not be the development director. There should be a check and balance just like in the US government. Again, this is not Upper Arlington, where they have a similar project. It's on Lane Avenue. Upper Arlington would never have this in Old Arlington. Main Street is Old Arlington. So this is not Upper Arlington. This is not Grandview. This is Bexley. I asked Continental Realty and Mr. Cass, how about we build a community center and we can name it in your honor and we would all win. That is something the whole community could get behind and support, and it would benefit all of us. This is not a project that is worthy to be in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Sure.
Could you please come up to the lectern so everyone can hear your question? Thank you.
There are 2 renderings in the most recent PDF that we were given that are completely missing, that were very revealing, and they are on page 17 and 18 of the PDF from 9/8. Is it possible that you could show that to people here who might not have been here during that meeting?
Yeah, and what I'm actually going to ask is for the applicant to come up and address the west elevation specifically, the back of the building, and some of your concerns. So, because I know that they do have drawings of some of those and they really didn't go through and explain them.
These are aerial renderings that were deleted after they were really soundly poo-pooed at the previous meeting.
So these were from the meeting 2 months
from,
ago.
They were from 9/8 from the PDFs that were distributed or on 9/8 pages 17 and 18.
Yeah, no, I
We
have
can
them,
look
but
for
just
that.
to be clear, I just not specific to this project, but I just want everybody to be aware I never delete anything. So it's not deleted. It's just in the prior submissions folder, which is all available online. I'll pull them up now, but I just want to be clear. Nothing.
Oh, I know you didn't delete them. They just weren't provided in the newest ones.
Right.
Thank you.
Because there weren't new material.
Yeah, thank you, Karen.
Okay, so is there anyone else new that would like to speak? Okay, I'm gonna ask the applicants then to come back up, and if you heard some of the concerns, a lot about the west elevation, some about the back of the building. Can you come up and go through some of those elevations and explain what your design does from those perspectives?
Yeah, happy to address that. if you could, let's see, let's start with, I think the fourth or fifth slide. It's sort of the corner of Hudson. That's this one. So, I mean, I would like to say that the elevations, this image, there's an image in the back. There is nothing in these sets that we're trying to hide. These are pieces that have been included from the submission that was at the deadline. So what you're seeing here is a look down the space between the Alexander and the building. You're looking along that facade. I think if you go to the back rendering, we can at least talk a little bit more about how, go one more. You could do one more because it's a little more of a straight on. So we chose not to take this from the ground level because there is a fence and so forth. And we wanted to make sure that you were able to see the entire facade. So I know this is an unrealistic view from the trees of a squirrel, but the reality is what we're trying to show you is in more than just an elevation, kind of how this is set up. So we talked a little about this 2-story piece on the corner and how we took the corner off the building a little bit. It helps to open up the massing of the building on the corners. This is the northeast corner. We also have done the same thing on the opposite corner. We have the exact, it basically is a mirror of what you see right here. And it's just that we don't have that image in this deck. But it looks like this on a mirror side. So we have a 2-story element and we have an eroded corner on this side, just like you see here. So the materiality does wrap and change in much the same way. What I think you start to see in this image is the grade and the topography. So the grade and the topography is changing as it's coming down this corner. So there's what you see on this end. It's just harder. It's harder for us to render because of how the topography does. So if you go to the elevations, it's probably the next place you can see both the back. This is the front too. So let's go one more slide. So the north elevation and the west elevation are included on this slide. And again, this has been in the deck. So this is the back, this is the north elevation. You can see the 2-story facade. You can see the eroded corner, the same piece, the eroded corner. Again, we were told to try to think about materiality as it changes around the corners. A massive amount of masonry probably isn't appropriate on this backside, in our opinion. So we tried to respond to that. The elevation along the west side, again, topography changes in a couple different ways along this, and so we've included this elevation in this set. If you would like, I think bring up the one slide that Scott sent today. And again, we wanted to make sure that we had other images for people to see, and this is something we weren't able to get done in time for the original application. So this is a photograph of obviously in the parking lot at the Alexander. And I'd like to just talk through this image for just 1 second. So what you're seeing here is basically a 1-story retaining element. This hillside falls at a pretty steep rate. And the topography change between here and here is, I mean, I went out there and measured it. It's actually almost a story. So what you need to understand is that when we come through with the new street, we're actually coming in at a level that is down here. So this building that is currently there and is actually in almost the exact same plane from what you see right here, as far as distance from property line, is 1 story below ground here. You've got 1.5 stories of first floor because of the way the topography works. This vestibule is actually a 1/2 story low. Then you have 1, 2, 3, plus a roof line that makes up another piece. So we really compare this. I'm not going to say this is not higher. This is higher, but this is not at a height that is up here. It just isn't. And I think that we need to understand there is mass and there is building that is currently there. So to say that there's nothing on that site right now, I think is not entirely accurate. But I will say that yes, what we are putting up is it does fill that space up more than what's there. But we do have these 2 images and we're happy to talk about them more. So happy to answer any questions that you might have on it. So.
So you also brought a light study. Do you want to talk about that?
I'm gonna let you, because I know I didn't produce it, so I don't know what you were able to.
Yeah. So Ryan Pearson with the Edge Group, 330 West Spring Street.
we did prepare a quick shadow study, and it's still in development. We're trying to get rid of the dark colored roof so we can see the actual shadows on the building itself. But I think what it is trying to depict is the shortest daylight day of the year, December 21. It is showing at 10 a.m. cast shadows. By the time you get to noon, the shadows in the morning are relatively at the base of the Alexander building, so that the thought is by noon, the shadow would be, the Alexander would not be in shadow anymore, and we would start going to sunlight for the entire Alexander. So as you go through the spring and summer months, it only gets better. Likewise, when you get to the evening time, the 4 o'clock shadows, obviously the shadows are going to be cast to the east. Therefore, the Alexander and the Gateway are really not impacted by our building. It's really just a shadow study to try to show what the actual shadows are going to be on the building in reality. Karen, do you have those cross sections that they might show a little bit better relationship, I think, to what's happening with the grades? And
Are they in the full packet?
no, they were a separate thing. We just added color today for the tree commission submittal.
Oh, from your email for the tree commission?
Yeah, it would have been today. I don't even know what time. And just so everybody knows, I mean, we are trying to do what we can to keep the process rolling, and we're feeding information as we're developing this. We are submitting it for the tree commission. We submitted today. We talked to Elena yesterday. I mean, things are rolling so fast on this that we're doing what we can as far as getting information out.
So is this what you were looking for?
That is the cross sections that if we can get them at higher resolution.
And I had a question because one of the residents was talking about the trees in the renderings, the
Mhm.
trees that they show, is that the trees after 1 year or is that the trees after 10 year? I mean,
Oh, I mean, when it comes to planting design and planting plans, we don't design for a landscape that's going to be established in 3 years, 5 years. I mean, you're designing for a landscape that's at least 10 or 15 years out. You're getting some establishment and some maturity, but really the trees and the plant material aren't mature for 25, 30 years out. Now on a commercial property, we do try to plant them a little bit denser to get a quicker establishment and give some foundation to the overall development. So I would say planting some of the shrubs at a closer relationship than I might do at my house or on if we're working on a
Right.
single family design.
right.
There we go. So with the cross section, this is from as-builts on the Alexander. So it's very accurate, I would say. You can see the relationship and the height of the two buildings when it comes to the site and what is going on. And I think I heard Mr. Roush talk about 5 stories over the podium. I would venture to say that the Alexander is a very similar architectural type. And although it's not the exact same massing in the north-south direction, it's still a similar or comparable building mass to what is being proposed on this site. If you combine it with the Gateway and you look at it as an overall development.
I'm sorry, but please be quiet while he's speaking, okay? He was respectful while you were speaking, so please be respectful while he is speaking.
You don't need.
I'm sorry, but if you cannot keep quiet, you'll have to leave.
Is there any way you can zoom in on the top cross section in particular? And I think the other thing, as you're looking at the sections, the red dash line does show what the grades are doing from the survey, the existing grades. And where Brad was talking about the fall off of the existing site, it is about 8 to 10 feet at that property line. And the other thing that I would point out is along that west property line, currently there are 2 trees that are basically where the Alexander's driveway connects into our parking lot or the existing parking lot today. Very 2.5 inch, maybe 3 inch caliper trees. They're small, they're new. We have shown a series of trees along that entire property line to try to help provide shade and canopy to the city on the 2 parking lots, and also to help buffer between the 2 uses. So will those trees be as large as they're shown in the elevations and renderings in 10 years? Probably not.
How far is the Alexander built off of the lot line?
So currently there is a location where the easternmost portion of the Alexander gets to within 2 feet of the actual property line. If you got there today, there's a curb that's right there. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, the building is 5 feet off. The curb where the parked car is about, that curb is about 2 feet off of their building.
But the actual building is about 5 feet off the lot line.
That's true. Yes. The building is about 5 feet off the property line. And then we have another 10 feet of green space before you get to the drive aisle. So that's where the trees and the shrubs, and we're trying to replace the hedge that's out there along the Rusty Bucket and the parking lot. We're trying to do an in-kind replacement of the hedge piece and the lower shrubs that are going to be on it. In the end, it will be more like a mound. Once you get to the Alexander, there is a retaining wall that's out there today, and we're not exactly sure if that's faced all the way down. So our plan is to gradually take that mound and transition that up to existing grades as it feathers to the north.
So I see a dimension of, what is that, 10 feet and then 22 feet and 10 feet.
Correct.
So that's off of the lot line.
It's off the
So
property
from
line.
the side of the Alexander to the lot line, you've got 5 feet and then 10 feet to the road. Correct?
Yes. Yeah, and I think we're showing about 45 feet of separation between the building to the face of the.
And you're putting
proposed
trees
building.
on both sides of the street, or you, you're like?
We are putting trees on both sides of the street. On the east side of that drive, those are going to be upright trees just because of limited plant area or plant bed along the face of the building. So those will be upright trees. They're not going to provide a lot of shade or canopy. Whereas the trees that are on the west side of the street will feel more like a street tree.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything else you want to address then as part of the landscaping and or as part of anything that?
I mean, I
rebuttal
can
to
quickly
the-
go through the site plan, but we haven't changed a lot. We did.
I mean, it's really up to the board members. And I'll just reiterate that another part of this process is that, and Ryan, you already know this, but just to reiterate to the audience that it needs to also go through Tree and Public Gardens Commission.
Correct.
Okay, in respect of time, why don't we go to board members' questions and then you can all come back up one last time to answer some of our questions. So is there a board member? Yeah, I just think he said it was of similar, so we all understand, sir, that it's not being built over a parking garage, that it's not a true 5/1.
That at all. John Roush, the Alexander condominiums is a commercially constructed steel and concrete building with a garage on the first floor. What they're planning on building is a concrete podium with at least five stories of wood framed businesses and apartments built on top of that. It is no different than a wood frame condo built out in the middle of nowhere. It is a wood frame condo. Ours is steel and concrete. It is dramatically different.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go to board members then. Is there a board member that would like to go first? All right, you're gonna make me pick?
I'll go first.
Mr. Heyer. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate all the comments that I've heard and the sensitivity to this building. I'm fascinated by this section because I don't think the renderings actually show what we're looking at here, in the sense that this 5-story line, this is the 5-story line, correct? the 5-story roof line is almost the same as the Alexander. How is that possible? Because the renderings don't make it look that way from the street views. Now, we don't have a cornice line here at the top of 4 for a lot of the side elevation. And I'm wondering if the perception of the height is, and this suits the ARB, I think, for what we are here to do, and that is, can we actually mask this 5th floor more with a more continuous cornice instead of just at the brick portions of the building? Now, you know, having that fifth story up here for the majority of what's going to be there on the west, and having those be almost the same. Plus, notice that the new building is further away from the Alexander, and the road is invisible from the first floor. The first level of parking, which is below grade over here, and would have been below grade if, you know, the building, if this grade was kept here. So the perception of this building is 1, 2, 3, 4, and if there's a cornice, then there's the 5 up here, correct? Or is this the 6th? No, because this is low, this is below grade, right? So 1 plus 5, right?
Plus 4. Basement, parking, and it's 4 over 1 on the podium.
No, I understand that, but in terms of the floors that are above grade over on this side is 1 plus 1, 2, okay, 1 plus 4, so it's 5 total, right?
Yes.
And then over here, this is kind of below grade from where we are now with the current housing building, right? The brick buildings that exist. So we're going up 1, 2 floors higher than what's there currently. And if we add a cornice here, the perception will be that we're really only going up 1 floor. That's my take on this based on what I'm seeing here. This also has a top floor that's almost the same as the new building, except the perception is that it's shorter because of this cornice line. And that's one of the problems that I've had, and you know, we talked about this during the charrette, is that you want this perception, right? You want the perception and the shadow line to be as low as possible. And then you can, and I was hoping that we'd be able to step this facade back more than what we're showing. And I know it's about where the structural lines are and the materials, but the way that you can compensate for that is by having a little more overhang than even what you're showing now. That would include the brick areas, and then maybe it switches to the metal condition or where you don't. So part of the problem is you still have all of this height. I'm not saying that you need to switch materials, but could you, actually bring, make this top floor have this be more commensurate with the Alexander by having a cornice line that was, I'm not saying it has to be the whole thing is the same because that'll feel monotonous, but is there a way to break it up? It doesn't, no, I wouldn't do the whole thing. Like I would just go this section, maybe this section and that section. And in a sense, what's happening is what we tried to do at the front, which was to, and this was a great advancement as far as I'm concerned in this design, was that you have this recess on Main Street, that now the proportions are vertical of these two end components as opposed to being one long facade. I don't think we're there yet on the west. Even though you've broken it up with material, you haven't really broken it up in terms of recess. And I think that was a couple of the comments that we had during the working session. How can you do that? I know you're maxing out all the floor area you can possibly get for your apartments, but there's got to be a way to visually break the monotony of the stacking of the floors. That's it. You're doing it here. I understand that. Okay. And you've got this brick cornice here, but this is what people in the Alexander are going to see. And as far as I can tell, the Alexander, because there's a retaining wall that's actually going to be this tall. Is that correct? It's going to come up to about here. Oh, it's being removed. But go back to that section. So what's this? Yeah, you're mounting up to a retaining wall, correct?
Yeah, so there's an existing retaining wall that's coming off the south side of the Alexander to get into their service area.
Right, but does this fade away because the grade goes up as you get to the back to the north?
We're going to actually excavate and keep the wall where it is. So we'll have a mound that tapers into this, I guess, larger mound. So as you go to the south by the actual parking lot,
it tapers away.
It'll taper down and it might be more like a 3-foot high mound.
But that's at the gateway and not at the Alexander.
Correct. Yep. And then
But the
Alexander, the grade will be held up at the grade that it is hitting the building today. Yes.
So the visible floors will be, I mean, people can look down into this, but in terms of floors actually being added from what's existing, we have these two.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So again, the monotony of the facade is my problem. And it's about materiality, and it's about cornice lines, and it's about perception of the floors. Just like the Alexander, you have a perception of it being 1, 2, 3, 4, but in fact it's 5. And then there's below grade as well. So can that be improved upon? And then the go back to the elevation, right here. So here you have where you stepped back. I think one of the things that we thought coming out of the working session, the charrette, was that this facade would also not be straight up and down for that whole north elevation. And the idea that I think a couple of board members had mentioned was, as you work your way back, that it gets broken down. Well, it's not really getting broken down. It's just a material change, except for this one corner here. And is there a way to break this down even more? And again, is it material change only, or is it going to be cornice lines? Is it going to be, cutting away back here and taking away square footage in order to reduce this effect? Because this is what will be visible. One layer of the parking plus 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of hardy board siding, I guess is what it is. With this really being the only recess into the facade, these don't really count as far as I'm concerned, because it's such a shallow recess. This one works, right? But can it be broken down even more? So I did walk back there after the charrette, and I did note the distance from this facade to the back line of the houses on Parkview. But I think that on Bryden, but the sense that it's not broken down, I think, is part of the problem here. It's not broken down as much. I will also note that this 6-story section is directly east of the Gateway building, and the Alexander is somewhere, I'm understanding, is somewhere in here, correct? Okay. So the Main Street elevation, which is what we, I think, talked about a lot in our charrette, I think has come a long way. And I think there's a lot of success going on there in terms of materiality, the brick usage. I think it's fitting for Bexley, and I like where it's going. The commercial aspect of it fits into the Main Street guidelines and what we're looking at for the commercial corridor. But the residential side, as we work our way back to the north, I still think that there's some work to do on that. The cornices, if we go back to let's go to the Hudson 29 elevation or perspective view. We can go to that one. Yeah. So this cornice line is it's working, but I was hoping it was going to mask more of that fifth floor. Maybe it needs to have a little more overhang than what we're showing here. This is nicely downplayed. But then you get to the sixth floor, and I think you're negating the trying to play down the sixth floor by creating this shadow line of a deeper cornice. I'm not sure that this is the way you want this to work, because now it really reads like a tall sixth floor, as opposed to what we're trying to do here with a cornice line above floor 4 and reducing this. But then why would we come back in and do a deep dark cornice line at 6? So those are things to think about. Those are my comments and criticisms of the architectural image and what I was kind of expecting to come out of our charrette. But I very much appreciate the public space, the pocket at the in the middle of the block, which really helped to bring the scale of the vertical portions of the massing into play with, as you showed on your Noli plan, with Main Street. So that, I think that's quite successful. But there's other things here that can help to mitigate the height issues. I also don't think it's helpful that you have, these spandrel vertical elements. I just don't think that really plays into a residential scale, which is really what we're trying to accomplish towards the back of the building. So the fact that these are like vertical brick columns doesn't really play into a Bexley character. It's not even Arena District character, honestly. I mean, Arena District, you have more traditional brick buildings with cornices, and there are vertical piers, but the windows, some of them do. I grant you, there are some that do that, but that's not. I don't think that's Bexley, honestly. This is more successful. I think there's more to do back here, and certainly, downplaying these verticals will be helpful. But overall, this that we worked so much on in the charrette, having that public space is a great benefit, and I think it's much more of an urban success on Main Street now since our last session. So those are my comments.
I think
Is that okay?
with open dialogue.
Yes, please come to the mic with your name, please.
Yeah, I would limit it.
I understand. I remember listening to you.
What's your name, sir?
I'm sorry, Don Marshner. I live at 2250 Bryden. I remember your comments specifically from the last ARB meeting. You were very, and again, I think they've done a pretty good job of addressing the issue on Main Street relative to the open space and exit, and stepping the building back. But if you could, I don't know if you're able to do this or not, but if you could pull up the previous example or the previous submittal that was done and compare it to, and those, especially those elevations that we're talking about, the north and the west side, compare those in terms of massing from what was proposed previously and what they're proposing now. And I guess my point is you've done a great job, and they've done a great job of focusing on Main Street, but they haven't necessarily addressed the issues that, again, you've touched on relative to the residential sides of all this. The massing is as bad or worse because now we've added an additional floor. They've added additional units. I mean, the whole thinking was, after we left the meeting in September, I think it was that, okay, there's too much going on here. Keep my hands to myself. And, it needs to be scaled back. But in reality, they're adding additional units to the design and to the development from what they had proposed previously. The massing really hasn't changed. There is very little in terms of in and out, other than the corner that they've talked about, or the two corners.
You're talking about the north and the west.
Yeah.
And
well, I guess I'm talking about all three sides of
the three sides
of the building, other than Main Street.
Right.
So again, I don't see that there has been, we've changed materials. There's a different look. They've obviously gotten away from the wings on the corner of Main Street or on the two corners of the building. But in reality, the massing and the scale of the building hasn't changed. It's actually gotten worse because of the additional floor.
Well, thank you for your comments, but I disagree. And we are asking for more improvements to the west and to the north and to the east side.
Okay, so if that's the case.
But
then
there are ways to step back buildings so the perception from the ground is not a worse scale, but actually a better scale. And that's what I've been working with them. And all the board members have been working with them to try to achieve.
So
if you're saying that they're adding square footage to this building from what we had before, I'm unaware of that. And if that's the case, then that needs to change.
Well, it seems like there's more units, so I don't know if that
seems like, or
well, there are. I mean, I know. Yeah.
Okay.
And additional parking, which addresses one of the issues that we've raised, which is the number of the variance and things like. And I know that's a separate issue, I think, with zoning and things like that.
I understand. Can I just finish my?
Sure, I'm sorry.
Thanks. So what we are asking for is improvements to the west and the north and the east. Okay, and the cornice lines and the impressions that we have from the street on all sides, the grade levels that I'm grasping, you know, in terms of what your perception is going to be, we're sensitive to that. Whether you're in the Alexander or whether you're you know, on Main Street, or you're at City Hall, or you're at Brassica. These are all important to us. Bryden Road.
Okay.
Which there's no road going back there anymore. There's just a.
Well, there's still road going back there.
There won't be.
No,
Well,
there's not.
it's still shown on the plans.
That's shown. It's a bike. It's a pedestrian.
path.
But yeah, well, it's still wide enough for a car to be driving around through there.
I'm finished with my comments. Thank you.
Okay.
If you want to go on to another board member.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Hall.
I think what this evolution has shown is some of the things that we were saying early on. Cutting back the building, creating stuff in the building really helped the scale. So I think the Main Street elevation has come a long way. I agree that the west, the north, and the east elevations all need some more attention. What we've already done on the north, where you kind of opted in and took out parts of the building on the corner, that starts to help out the mass on the corners. The other thing, as Bill pointed out, that I really struggled with when I looked at this afternoon was the facade that's facing City Hall, and that has these long column looking like brick structure pieces with the black down the middle. You know, the building on every other facade is a bunch of punched openings, and you know that really place for over residential. So I don't really think that is a very strong language, and I think that you know another really strong look at. Back to the Main Street elevation. On the upper floor, we've added the sixth floor. I think adding that sixth floor has actually improved the mass, because I think there's a lot of building going on one level, and being able to pop that up actually improves and enhances the mass. But those two patios that are named the patios, when that sets back, are those two areas out front, are those going to be accessible to those units? It's not shown on the plan that way currently, at least I'm not using it that way. Yeah, so I think everywhere where there's a cutback or a recess or whatever, there should be access from the inside of the building out to that's what's going to help, is to activate those patios and start to see people up there. The other thing is this recess, this courtyard, if you want to call it that, where you're showing the outdoor dining associated with the restaurant. I think right now you're showing the steam lighting that's going over, and eventually that dining is going to want to be covered. And I think I'd rather see that be designed into the building versus applied to the building. So what you see a lot with these structures is that the solution becomes a fabric awning that takes care of that. So I think that needs to be explored. I love how it's recessed. I think this whole interior courtyard area can really be a fascinating place to go and hang out and have an experience. The other thing is that I noticed, this is a minor comment. When you come into the building, your only way on the second floor, you're gonna put tenants up there, correct? So really the only way to get to them is visually and understand that vertical connection is an elevator. I don't know if this lobby where you come in, I think, yeah, that's not even a two-story lobby, so that you come into the main entrance of the building, it's not, you're walking into the ceiling of an elevator, and you gotta work your way up. So I don't know if there's a way to enhance that lobby to make the lower level when you walk in, feel more connected to the upper level in somehow, some way. And I think, that would be great if that could be explored also. And then besides everything that Bill said, I'm okay with that.
Thank you. Mr. Steele?
I think a lot of my comments and feedback setbacks on the west side of the capacity and taking those opportunities perhaps creating some based on this. So you have these most important. I don't see any free on any up off the ground. That's an opportunity to have some capacity. This often would be that this off the side. It's not a giant massive building, it's true elevator. And I definitely need a lot of work to be done on stepping back to that. I don't know if there's a way to through the program to that courtyard space on the north half of the building. You can shrink that up and maybe accommodate the same square footage of actual units by stepping back the upper floors. Because that courtyard itself is kind of since it's not an active lot, but it's getting light to get light. There's an opportunity there perhaps in some way to step back and work on the top and achieve a little bit of soft on the lines. I work in rendering so that you can show anything on this. This like to this so that one. I think the fact that the bottom of this building is low grade and on the west side you'll be looking down from up. The other floors is actually much shorter in comparison. It's very similar to the other ones in that area. It's lost in some countries. I mean, yeah, it's a very large building where you're seeing now, but the reality is it's not a whole lot more like your buildings. And I'm guessing you're over that. I have some concerns that we're I've come in this really late, to get the doctor this month. I'm curious about some of the material we talked about. Is Hardy on this great thing, so Hardy, right? It's not metal now. And it's no more cast stone.
Thank you. Mr. Scott?
Sure, thank you. So, agree with some of the comments tonight about last minute submittals of information for not only the community, but our board to review, specifically on a project of this scale and importance in our city. It makes it very difficult for us to have to review that minutes before a presentation or a meeting. A lot of the times that happens on smaller projects and front porches and little additions that people are doing in our community. And as a board, we do our best to accommodate that for our residences. But this building is an anomaly for us to be reviewing and for the community to be discussing. So I agree that we need to strive to get that information and as a board member, and I can't speak for all the other board members, but at times that information I can look at and review, but I may need to pause and could even delay a project until I can digest and see all of that. That being said, I appreciate the efforts and how much this design team from the landscape, even civil and architecture and the owner has listened to this board to try to move this project into a direction where the architecture is relative to its location, its context, and its surrounding neighborhood. It is difficult because this site is zoned what it is, and it's not privy to our board. It has it has parameters by which it can be built, and any developer can come in and build that project. And this developer has chose to do this, and we have to react to that. If we could easily fight and say no, and then he sells it and someone else does something else, and we'll be right back here. So what we try to do as a board is to push for what we feel is quality project and something that addresses 360 degrees around the building. We have started to see some improvement on the communication of that design from this client on the north and the west side. There has been a lot of focus on the south side on Main Street. And I think, as you've heard from other board members and me previously, we feel it's getting very successful. One of the topics that people have mentioned tonight is the 6th story, which is big, right? It is tall on Main Street, but that 6th story is south. The north side of that 6th story is south of the Gateway north side. So it's not at the Alexander where people are living. It's on the commercial side of that development.
Where that 6th floor is, park for each residences. Just FYI.
Thank you. Did not know that. But it's still on the commercial side of what I would call the development of the programming of this site. And then, of course, we have pushed for trying to have the building step and be more reactive towards the north side of this site. And I feel that what the designers have brought to this meeting tonight in this development has gone a long way to start to break that corner down. There's been comments from the other boards, Mr. Heyer and Mr. Hall, about maybe continuing to push that, and I agree with that. I think massing wise and programming and leasable square footage is a challenge. I deal with it every day, but using facade and materials and cornices and the Alexander is a good example. That 5th floor is a mansard roof style, but it is still a floor. So there's ways to do that on a facade that helps change the scale of the building to help address the neighborhood. And I think the architects have gone a long way with the massing of that, but need to continue working on that facade. The north facade, in addition to what Mr. Heyer said, I think has come a long way, and we're starting to see what that is. But I think we still need to get some more clear images of how that is. Where I think this project right now is really lacking is, and I think it's a result, and I don't want to put words in the applicant's mouth, but it's a result of focusing on so many aspects because it is a large building and there's limited time, is that west facade. I think the west facade is the least successful architecturally. It's different than the east facade, and there's a long, really where the Alexander and those residents are looking at is really kind of the blankest wall of the entire project. So I think there needs to be a lot of attention to that facade. I don't know how much you can break it up by, doing recessed balconies or things within the unit. I'm pretty sure you can't just pull units out because I know how these buildings work. But there's a lot of things you can do to help continue to break down that facade. I think Mr. Heyer's comments about the cornice and breaking down and letting that 5th floor kind of be more of a mansard. I would never necessarily say mansard roof, but have that feeling of the break, I think is a good way to continue to address that. If you look at that building section, which I think is really important to understand, this building is a 5-story building compared next door to a 5-story building. Even if you look at that site plan again, please. I want to note, though this site is significantly larger in its acreage than the Alexander and the Gateway project, if you were to scale up that building proportionally, the figure ground of the 2 buildings that are to the west versus this new building, which is what I call a double courtyard with a courtyard on the south. The actual figure ground is fairly similar in what building coverage is to the landscape. The difference here is that 2 internal courtyards are not seen, and you have a lot of mass wall on the exterior. We have had conversations with the architect and the designers to try to open those courtyards up, and that's the resulting was to kind of cut the south facade and help break down that massing on Main Street. That is what added those units to the 6th floor. Yeah, well, that's the figure ground. So if you zoomed into, and I think this is also very interesting because I think this is good to see because This building isn't by itself. We have a very large building, which a lot of residents are here tonight, next to the west of it. It also casts shadows significantly to its neighbors to the north and to the west. And though those are different types of properties, we have the bank, we have some apartments and the single family to the north. There's a significant aspect of, relationship between these two, and being both at 5 stories. Yes, this building is going to shadow some of the lower floors of the Alexander, but not all of them. And then also, if you go back to the site plan, there's a relationship that this developer has pulled the building off of the north facade. Well, I'm sorry, the north property line. The Alexander being 2 feet from its property line. If you could imagine this building being 2 feet from the property line on the east, that would put these buildings side by side, and that actually wouldn't be able to do that in the building code based on what the Alexander was able to do. So this building's pulled off with this road, which is I think the developer, by sinking the access to the lower garage, kind of shields that lower floor. But the distance between the Alexander and the single family to the north, in relationship to this building and the single families on Bryden to the north, is almost 3 times the distance. So there is if you scroll up a little bit, the single families. So there is a fairly significant buffer and some landscaping. We were walking the site after our last meeting. Yes, we have a 5-story building looming in the backyard of these single family homes, but in the overall development of this site, I think in this density and what they're doing and all the things that they are, I guess, allowed to do, they are trying to make these gestures to help soften that blow. And I think we're trying to work with them on the massing as well as the materiality of these facades and how it's treated to help, one, bring quality, but also change that scale. So it's something that is attractive to look at when you're in your backyard. We can only take it so far because we can't pay for the building. But if this was going forward, we're really as a board trying to get that quality brought out. So overall, I felt it necessary tonight to kind of backtrack and give a summary of our approach to all of this, and the efforts that the developer has made and the architects have made, and the landscape architect. Sorry, Ryan, I'm going to mention you by name. So in that, I think I would like to, my official comment of going forward is really starting to develop and looking at that west facade. I think there's some more work that has to happen on that because of its proximity and to the Alexander and what they're going to be looking at every day. I think the north facade has come a long way, and I have less concern about its impact because of how we step the corners down and it's softening that building, massing and its feel of its kind of its presence, which I think is very successful. And I also like the can you go to the east facade parking view? The efforts that have been moved forward on this, the public spaces at the southeast corner, I think are quite successful. And I appreciate all of the incorporation of our comments from our previous meetings. There should be one from Overbrook City Hall looking back. How the proposed building, and I do agree with the kind of large bay windows. I'm not against having some articulation on the brick, but I think the dark band between each floor is almost too dark. It's not necessarily a Bexley idea, but having maybe a little bit more color match to the brick would help soften that up, but also give you more punched window feel. But overall, the massing and the approach to how you're breaking this down into kind of 4 masses with a field in between is, I think, successful. But how the building sits at the grade, how the building comes and meets the grade and meets this parking lot, I think is actually quite successful. The landscaping softens all these transitions. We have 2 major parking garage entrance here and a major entry into the building, but it doesn't feel like I'm sitting in just a big blank parking lot. So I appreciate the efforts that landscape has done and the owner's done on kind of the architects have done to kind of soften that. And I think the parking garage at this kind of 2-story corner is actually quite successful. So I appreciate that. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Can I add one more thing before you make your comments?
Sure.
Is it possible to get the renderings so that we see the neighborhood in context? Because all of these have a greenscape in the background, but not the real urban condition of Bexley. And it would also might be helpful to actually do some renderings utilizing a view from Bryden Road and looking, through the properties. I mean, I'm not a I'm not as tech savvy as I'm sure the people who are working in the architecture firm landscape, but there's got to be a way to somehow render that in the views. That would be really helpful.
Thank you. I actually think a lot of what Pete said reflects my same thoughts. And I originally was pushing for the cutout that ended up on the front of the building to be on the side, because I felt that there's very few times that you are actually standing and looking at the face of the building, and the face of the building on Main Street is similar in size to the Gateway project. My concern has always been that we needed breaks along the side. And on the east side of it, I think that will be seen a lot as people are driving down Main Street. I think that, you know, that whole side of the building is, it's a big. And it's similar then on the west side for the residents who live in the Alexander. And, you know, that the Alexander and Gateway, although they are one project, they were broken into two buildings. And I know we can't break this into two buildings, but I think the perception would be really nice if there was something that made it feel a little bit more broken down. And so my worry was that by doing something so amazing on Main Street, we were going to give up breaking the building up on the east and the west side. I also think that the west side deserves a little bit more brick. So, you know, when I look at that facade, it just feels to me that it's too much paint, and especially compared to the front. But again, this is the east. Yeah. And so this west side going down, or actually that's the back. And again, the back doesn't bother me as much, because I don't think that with the fences that are in the backyards of the people in Bryden and the amount of distance there, if we put brick on the first couple floors, I don't even think you would see them, because of the, you know, the distance and the landscaping. So I am more concerned about the west side. That again, I don't think there's enough brick on the west side, and I'd love to see something that broke it up more, similar to what Mr. Heyer was asking for. So I do think that we have made a lot of progress. And I understand that a lot of people in this audience are not happy about this building being built at all. But the reality is this board did not bring this project here. We did not decide, you know, what happens on this site. We are only to react to what is here, and we are trying to make sure that what gets built is the absolute best project that can be built. It is a very strange process, because people are working every day, updating drawings, trying to get us more information, and they could sit on it and wait and to bring it to us next month. But by that time, it might be too late. And in some way, they think that by bringing it today, they may be answering a question of yours. So I hope you don't take that they are trying to slide it in last minute and bamboozle you, because that is not what happens. And this board deals with this on every project. And we don't like it, because it does leave us where we are last minute trying to see what has come in. But it does help all of you when you proposed for your project to be done. It helped you. This board tries to work with the community and do the best we can for everyone involved, owners, neighbors, city, everyone. And so I hope that you understand that, and that you will give us some courtesy as we work through this process, that we are trying to make sure that this project is the best that it can be. With that, would you like to come up and go through any more explanations?
Yeah, if we could. You know, I want to thank you all for the time and efforts we put in here. And I hope you comprehend that, you know, we are trying to address and react to the comments. I mean, I think we've seen that in the progress that we've made over the course of the project so far. There are just realities to things. You know, obviously schedules are important. You know, I think Frank has indicated prior that, you know, we have deadlines that are associated with capital that come in December. Yeah, we feel like we're pretty close, and some of the issues and concerns that have been raised are, you know, I'll simplify it, are relatively minor. you know, I'm an engineer. Looks a lot to me like maybe it's some Lego block stuff, just moving things around and kind of cleaning it up. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but ultimately where we are is, you know, we are really trying to fit in and address concerns that are raised by you, but we'll also get to a point where we actually have a project that's moving forward. And, you know, we do have a closing date that's coming up that we have to, there's no extending it. It is what it is. So what I guess what I'm wondering sitting here today is, you know, I'm not sure that there is a way, or if there is, and Catherine, I'll lean on you on this, if there's a process that we could either have another meeting in the next couple of weeks where we can sit down and address these concerns, because I do believe that they're relatively easy to address, and bring it back to you. I recognize, you know, some of the information that has come in today is, you know, for some folks would feel like it's a late notice or late information. It's really intended to try to improve communication, just to understand that, you know, these drawings obviously in our world is something that we look at all the time, and we understand that the public is not accustomed to them, but the renderings are really pretty pictures, right? That's the real information that's on the wall right now. That's really what we should all be reacting to, and that was in the packet that we submitted originally. With that in mind, you know, what I guess what I'm hoping for, and Catherine, I don't know if you can weigh in on this, but, you know, is there a way to have another meeting, maybe in 2 weeks, where we have a week to address these comments, because they do feel minor to me, and that we can get those back to you. And then,
Are you asking for another work session, or are you asking for another
board session? Because I don't think we're far off. And maybe I'm misreading the room, but I believe the way we stand right now with you all is some minor adjustments on the west elevation, potentially a little bit of a more look at it on the north side, but those feel relatively minor from my perspective, and then just some additional information on the east side. So is that a feasible solution? The problem is we have the calendar, and I recognize in December your boards are not active. So that's the
Doing the math. In theory, it's fine. I mean, I don't mind at all as the staff coordinating it. But the reason we don't have a meeting for BZAP in 2 weeks is that it's Thanksgiving. And so BZAP in November is pushed back a week usually. So it's November 30th.
Can we meet on an alternate night? I mean, I know Thursdays are the key, although I'd be willing to meet here on Thanksgiving if you all are. I need to have this project through. So that's where I'm a little desperate here. I would be willing to even go as far as to say, if we can get a recommendation with conditions that we come back, we can do that as well. You know, if there is a possible way to make that happen.
And what do you need? You need something from BZAP saying that it's approved, or you need a recommendation from us?
Well, I think that I understand the process to be that we need a recommendation from you to go to BZAP. I mean, there is the chance that we take the rejection and go to BZAP, but I'm not sure how successful that would be. But, you know, my preference obviously is, given where we are, you know, schedule wise, I mean, we are really up against the wall here, and need a solution.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have the holidays. So there are many of us that will be out of town for, you know, the week of Thanksgiving. And I just don't know that they're
I'm just trying to
get it in that quickly is going to happen.
I'm looking to you, Catherine. Does it make sense to take it to BZAP though, to look at the 6th floor? Because ultimately you've got to get a variance from BZAP from the 6th floor. And I feel like we're back to like getting a.
Turn your microphone on here.
Yeah, typically, I have my code up and I'll have to look at it, but typically what happens is that there is a recommendation that goes to BZAP. You know, you hope for approval. Sometimes it's disapproval. Sometimes the recommendation is no recommendation or a request to remand to finalize the architecture. I think we changed that code. I'll have to look at it to be sure what the language is. So one option may be to move it forward. You could also have a special meeting, but it's the timing of getting that done. This board could schedule a special meeting and have a second hearing on it, but in order to give you the time to get them what they need and for them to meet and not meet the week of Thanksgiving, you're basically talking about a special meeting in a week. In order to get that done, which is likely not sufficient for either side for you to get it done and for them to have time to review, to have a meeting. So that's one of the issues to do that.
Maybe I can offer this, and we've been going at it for 2 hours now. If we could do a brief recess or something, and I could talk to consultant staff, make sure I'm not putting them in a pickle of what they can complete. Everybody thinks it's just a push of the button, but it really isn't.
Right.
So, if we had 10 minutes, could talk through the issues, come back. And I can outline a game plan on as far as timing and schedule, maybe that works for you all.
Yeah, I think
It's in December. I don't know the specific date, middle of December, before Christmas.
Yeah. And so by that, you need something from BZAP that.
Correct.
That BZAP has approved it and that it would, but if it has to come back to us, that doesn't hurt you as long as BZAP has said that. And you're also assuming that BZAP will approve you in one meeting.
Or have a special meeting. They could also have a special meeting. Yeah.
I'm not expecting the whole shot here, but I really would think that we could. I hear your comments. And maybe it's just the optimism I have from working with Frank and where we are from where we started. And it feels like we're really very close. So.
Yeah, I mean, I will say you have made great strides. I think this board feels that you have listened and tried. So,
would it be possible, because of the importance of this project, to have a special ARB session in December and then a special BZAP session to follow that, in order to expedite, but also to make sure that everybody has a chance to see what we've been asking for before it goes to BZAP, and that we make that recommendation. That's not to guarantee that a special session that BZAP is going to give you.
And maybe to Karen's point, it would be worthwhile to be heard at BZAP in the next meeting, just as a point of addressing where we are from August, so just so everybody sees that and then follow the appropriate steps.
Yeah, I personally think you should come to BZAP next November 30th, no matter what, even if it's just for an update, because if you have very negative feedback on the 6th story, which we're all in support of, you want to hear it before.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
do
that as just an update.
I mean, I feel out of line asking the question, but if I could have a recess briefly with
I think that's good.
the consultant team.
I think that's great. And we'll all take a recess so we can use the facilities, and we'll just be back here in 10 minutes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Oh.
So you can take yours. Yours is the use.
Oh, yeah. And story. That's why I. Well, I'm not comfortable enough with them not seeing November 30th.
Yeah.
That's why I gave the recommendation that I gave. I don't care.
Well, because this is my perspective, the way that group handled public comment. That's different than the way this group. If they got allowed to wait for them, they're likely to die off. I would put that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just saying, I don't know, I just.
We're crazy Nazis.
I would have to go and ask for the variance. I could go.
I like the, I didn't say, I don't, yeah, it's not a recommend to approve, it's recommend to move it to VSAP with the review back to.
I don't see that they have shown.
Just really well. That wasn't for you.
Oh, man.
Okay, we're gonna come back to order again, please. Okay, I'm going to ask the applicant to come back up and let's talk about next steps. So what is it that you are asking for?
I think based on the conversation with Catherine, it would be a recommendation for a remand back. I'll let her explain the legalese of that, but it would be, it would allow it to go to BZAP, but still ultimately need to come back here. Is that correct? So we would be able to go to BZAP for the November 30th hearing, then, respectfully request a second, I'll call a special meeting in December, early December, to, react to what we've advanced, and then go back to a special meeting in BZAP for final approval, assuming that we can meet the requirements. Am I communicating that correctly?
Yeah, so the way that the code is written, in order to move forward to BZAP, there has to be some kind of decision made here. Or if the applicant can refuse to table, because it's their choice to table or not. If they refuse to table, then it would just move forward. So one of the things that the code would allow is that this board, and the board has done it before many times, but the board could make a recommendation to the BZAP, make a recommendation for approval, or that it be forwarded to BZAP, but for final determination, it be remanded back to ARB for determination of the certificate of appropriateness.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Because BZAP has already discussed this project.
It went before them for an informal review only.
So can it go back to them for informal review again?
It can't, well, it won't help the applicant if that happens, because they're going to have to, they cannot in an informal review make any final determinations on special permits or variances or anything like that. They would really have to make a final decision on those items for most applicants to make the kinds of decisions that they're going to have to make before closing.
So you're saying they can't make a final decision, but they can give them direction like they did the first time that they went to BZAP?
Not on a variance.
We didn't get a direction. It was public comment and then sent to you all.
Right. And
I thought there
it's
was-
not really, they can't sort of give them an
But it could be
informal
tabled.
decision. It would have to go to them for a formal determination. They could decide that they don't have enough evidence and table it. They could set another, their own special meeting if they wanted to. But they cannot just have an informal meeting and give them appropriate feedback. They would have to present evidence, hear the evidence, it'd have to be in the record, and they would have to decide whether they had enough evidence or they wanted, the applicant needed to table and have another hearing, which would be up to the applicant.
And when is the next scheduled BZAP meeting?
The
November
30th of this month.
Okay. So you are asking then for us to remand to them, and then you want a special meeting in December?
Correct.
But at that point, so you're still trying to get us to approve it before your deadline?
Correct, because I'm assuming I'm going to need BZAP approval. I doubt we'll get approval on the 30th. Given where we are today with your group.
But doesn't BZAP have the power, if we say we want it remanded, they don't have to.
They could say no.
They could say no. And
They
but
could.
the public perception of that to me is wrong.
That they could say no.
Well, that the public knows that they could say no, that they could say it's not going back to
Yeah.
ARB.
I don't think that has ever happened in the history of Bexley.
Just
But it
technically,
could happen.
technically,
It could. Because it is, because here's the way it works. The jurisdiction, because there are special permits, now a variance associated with this application, the jurisdiction for final determination of everything is with BZAP. It comes to you first because you have the expertise and you go up with a recommendation to BZAP, but the final determination is theirs. Historically, what has happened in Bexley most of the time, and particularly in a project of this magnitude, is that and I think the code now allows you, at one time it was unclear, but I think the code now allows you to request that it be remanded back to you for final determination. At one time, that was not as clear, I think, as it is now. And so when that happens, you can request that it be recommended back to you, come back to you for final determination of the certificate of appropriateness. Otherwise,
get
the
off of
final
that.
determination of the certificate of appropriateness is with BZAP, not you, because of all of these other things.
We would offer that as a condition.
And what happens if you just ask for more time?
I'm sorry,
What happens if you ask Capital?
I'm not in that legal, I just know what I was assigned and then, and it's been, that middle December closing date.
Yeah, and I get it. But the reality is, I think for a project this important, I think we cut a lot of months out by doing one, workshop. But I still think that a couple more meetings may be needed between us and BZAP to get this where everyone feels like they love it. And that's where we want to be. We want to love it. I don't think we want to send a compromised building to BZAP and then worry that it gets approved like that. And then we have no power to try to fix any of the things that we think are still kind of broken on it. So,
let me ask this. Is the applicant willing to specifically also agree with the board and ask BZAP to send it back?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, I think if the applicant is asking for that and you're recommending it, they could say no. There's always a risk.
As a architectural review, the 6th floor is a critical aspect of the design. And if BZAP does not approve that, they'll have to come back if the project's still viable with an alternate design, which we will have to review. So for me, wasting time rushing through design with the BZAP decision of that 6th floor or not is a pretty significant impact. So that's my only reason tonight I would recommend we're being okay with moving it forward into BZAP, but I would adamantly ask that it comes back, and I would not agree if it did not come back.
Well, we can agree to that condition of bringing it back.
Great.
So that's not a concern.
Is that legal?
Oh. Did I request
It
that it
is
comes back?
legal that it is legal that you impose a condition. It is absolutely legal that you impose a condition that it come back. It's specifically laid out in the code.
I thought
It
we
is-
weren't allowed to do that.
You do that, but the code was amended to allow you, you still can't bind them, but the code was amended to allow you to request that as part of your.
As long as it's mandatory, then
It's not mandatory.
no, I mean that, if we place that condition on the recommendation
And the applicant consents.
and the applicant consents, then it has to come back. BZAP could not say, forget it.
Could say, forget it,
Why? But if we make
because
it,
the jurisdiction is theirs.
so
building
now I'm
That's just the
confused.
way it
For
is.
building permit, all the way
For the
through,
certificate of appropriateness.
which gets them to building permit eventually.
Which gets them to building
Yeah.
permit. The jurisdiction is always there, so they have to voluntarily give it up to send it back to you. But I mean, so there is some risk.
So, so I'll just say that in the past, if you don't mind, Madam Chairman.
yes, go ahead.
We have had several projects come through ARB that were so important because there was a demolition involved, or it was a Main Street project or a North Cassidy project, where we really kind of held our ground to say, for everybody's sake, this needs to come back here. And I can't imagine that a project of this importance is going to be that you're going to have the rug swept, pulled out from under you by the seller. I just can't imagine that happening. But this project to me is too important to play games with conditions and remanding at this point. I don't see, this building's going to be here forever.
What I can tell you, sitting as the presenter here, is that I feel confident I'm not going to get approval on the BZAP meeting on the 30th.
Yeah,
I reckon, so which would force me to bring it back to you as part of the process. So I can tell you that, we'll come back. I mean, I don't know if you need me to poke my finger and sign in blood or whatever, but that's.
Well, and I think too, our workshop took months of work out of our changes and things. We made a lot of progress in that. And I think we would all be willing to do another workshop with you. But I think getting it to BZAP so that they can look at what we've done so far
Super important.
is
Well,
important.
yeah, no, I believe we need to have the BZAP on November 30th. I guess, so then secondarily then, let's
But I
assume
don't-
for.
But I don't know how to send it to them without them being able to just approve it and go with it. So
Just, all you can do is put a condition of remand, recommend a condition of remand to them. And with an applicant consenting to that condition and requesting specifically that they send it back. They have never,
I'm the applicant.
it, you know, jurisdictionally, they could say no. In Bexley, they have never said no on any project that you've requested to go back, to my knowledge.
I'm uncomfortable being pressured by a closing date for a project of this scope and scale.
So could, in the event that there's not a legal way to satisfy your concerns, can we just go ahead and schedule, not a workshop, but the next ARB meeting for the week after?
A special ARB public
Correct.
evening public meeting.
Correct.
When? December?
first week of December.
Yeah.
So we would be looking at December 7th is the first Thursday.
That's always the Christmas party, so
No, because we would normally be.
Does it have to be on a Thursday?
it doesn't.
We would normally be the 14th.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
So
We don't have a December meeting, so
does anyone have these chambers on December 7th?
I doubt it, but I can check tomorrow.
Okay, can we tentatively set it, a special meeting for December 7th? Are you saying you can't hear me?
So there are people that are not able to be in attendance. So, is that correct? Yes, the first day Monica's speaking.
Monica's first day is the 8th.
I think you make the.
Okay, let's,
Monica's on the 8th.
Sundown now, it's sundown the 7th.
I don't know who has these chambers,
What
booked.
about yeah, okay.
So maybe let's say the 6th, okay, Wednesday, the 6th. Yeah, and we will have to figure out with the city, and we will post it on the website as to when, but we will search for an evening in there that we can have these chambers in that first week of December to try to have a special meeting on just this project.
Thank you.
Can I just? I have no interest in pushing this through quickly. I don't care if they have to go back to Capitol and ask that. I'm in it for a good building. But I am very nervous about us going through more and more design without getting a read from BZAP. Whether,
But it sounds like if we send it to BZAP, we could lose control. So I don't know. Those are the rules. And I think that this board is reacting to them the way that they are. So, and unless if, I don't know, can a BZAP member come to our meetings and talk to us about, I don't know what we can do without just losing all control.
Again, if the closing happens in February, because you have a BZAP meeting after our next review, is Capitol walking away, and why should we feel the pressure of that in order to get the right building built? That's the way I see it. I'm sorry, but this building's going to be here forever. And there's a month or two in the coming weeks, or that doesn't make any sense. There's all this time getting bunched up right now, but the decisions we make are going to be for a lifetime.
And I understand your concern, but I've from my perspective, I don't feel like we're far off on what you've asked for tonight. And even with that in mind, I believe we'll be able to hit the sweet spot in the next meeting.
Well,
I just we can't guarantee that.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
If he asks for a vote and we say no, he can still go to BZAP, correct? Right? It just.
Yes, it goes to BZAP.
Goes to BZAP either way.
But then
But then our recommendation of having it come back is not on there.
Right, and then he has to start all over with a whole new project, right?
No, he does not. No, he
That's the
just
pro-
goes
that's
up
the other
with
problem.
exactly what you have.
If you ask for a vote and we say no, he still goes to BZAP.
Yep.
And they'll know that we said no, and that could influence them, but they still have all the power.
But Karen goes to those meetings, and so she would tell them what we like and what we don't like.
She would if you made a recommendation for a remand too.
But even if we send it to them with a no, that we're not recommending it as is, they can still turn it around and say yes to it and approve it. So,
That's my point.
yeah, so I don't know.
Okay, see, I think what Mr. Scott is trying to say is the applicant, you can't table it. They would have to choose to table it. If they don't table it, you have to make a recommendation or it goes up with no recommendation. It moves on. The control of whether it stays here or not ultimately is the decision of the applicant, because if it is original BZAP jurisdiction, they get to decide whether to stay or not. I think Mr. Scott's point is if they're really desperate on their timelines, they could refuse to table, go up with a recommendation in opposition. And, a BZAP ask for them to remand it, but he's saying if you're worried about losing control, you can lose control regardless. Either way. Right. Or you could make a recommendation that it just be remanded back to you and it moves forward. Or the applicant.
And
can
then I
just
think
say-
what we want to work with you is so remanding
Right.
it's the right thing in my mind to do, to be able to continue the process and.
I think the right. I think the right thing to do is see if you can extend your foot. I think I'm just sitting here, there's just a lot of conversation going around trying to accommodate this and everything, and I feel like our backs are against the wall with it. And I agree with Bill, I don't think it's fair to the community, and I don't think it's fair to the building and the project. It's a big project, and all we're trying to do is get it done the right way, and if we rush because of this.
Well,
I take a lot of clients and I've been here before and it's like, okay, we can extend that date if we need to. So I don't know.
I guess what is the loss in my request to remand it? With the knowledge that I'm coming back, you still have
A lot of people here next week is basically.
but it's not an approval.
But next week is our last week. We got a holiday with a thing going on.
Correct.
So there's a lot of people then starting on next week where schedules start to become very complicated for everybody. And that's.
So it is ultimately your decision to ask for whatever you want, and then we vote appropriately. But I think you should just know that we feel like the project still isn't there.
Right.
I would love you to be able to take it to BZAP and know that it must come back to us, but that's not the way we're set up. So,
But explain, I guess, the lack of knowledge by tabling it, what happens in that process?
If you table it, it just gets put on their next regularly scheduled meeting, which is January, right?
yes, yeah.
It gets
If
put
you
off
just
till
tabled it
January.
today and we did no special meeting for you, then we would see you the second Thursday in January.
And there's, what I'm hearing is there's no possibility for a special meeting?
No, we are saying that we can do
Okay.
a special meeting for you. I can't say what date that is because
Okay.
I don't know when these chambers are available.
I mean, I guess, look, I'm trying to work within the confines of the rules. So if there's a way to get a special meeting there early December, then I'm all for that.
And we can look at a date now and I'll check the room first thing in the morning.
Yeah, so,
Wednesday, December 6th works for me.
I know Keith says, right, and I don't know, our city council, are those meetings on Tuesday? I don't, you might know, is something else in here on Thursday?
Thursday the seventh,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You could meet.
No, there's nothing.
But then knowing that that's the first night of Hanukkah, I know that messes people up too, so,
What, can we do earlier in the day? I mean, I don't,
Well, they could meet.
I don't know, honestly, we've never had a
27th,
meeting
28th, or
earlier in the day that wasn't a workshop, but
Mhm.
how about if we talk to the city and figure out somewhere in that week, And then we will post it on the website so that everyone has enough
No, I mean,
warning
you
to.
could meet.
Yeah, very, very well. I mean, as long as
The
the
27th.
neighbors get notified, I mean, I don't want anything that's,
No.
problematic.
Yep, we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we'll look at that first week of December and see what we can do that will accommodate you. I'd like to keep these same board members coming back and not have.
Fair.
Madam Chair.
I'd also like to keep in our possibilities, November 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th to look at too.
It's 3 weeks away, giving the architect some time to
That's a
work.
good point.
But it's also prior to the next BZAP meeting.
Yeah, no, we can make that work.
And it needs to be a.
So,
a meeting.
and so also Thursday, the 30th. So what's in here on Thursday?
Thursday, the 30th is BZAP.
Is BZAP.
So that's what Mr. Scott was saying. You could meet that week, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday before the BZAP meeting. It's 3 weeks away, but it's after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so I could do the 28th or the 29th.
I can do the 29th.
29th.
What about Wednesday, the 29th?
I'm
Okay.
also free.
Okay, 29th.
Okay, we're gonna shoot for the 29th.
I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Should we table it to a date certain?
Yep.
Pending the room being available?
If the applicant is requesting a tabling
Yeah, request for it to be tabled.
to a date certain.
To
Yeah,
November
days.
29th.
Yeah, correct.
This November, yeah.
Okay, we will still put that on the website too, just so that anyone who's not here can see it and.
Great.
And
Thank you.
it will start at 6 o'clock, like,
And I'll get on that first thing in the morning, confirming that this room is available and posting it on the front page on our website.
Okay.
And that will be public notice as well, that special
I'm
session.
gonna public it tomorrow. Yes.
do we need to vote? For it to be tabled? Okay, so you're requesting that it be tabled to November 29th at 2023, is that correct?
Correct.
At 6 o'clock. Okay, is there a board member that will make a motion?
So moved. Higher.
Okay,
And the roll?
Mr. Hire,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Steele,
Yes.
and Madam Tony.
Yes. Okay, thank you. We will see you at that special meeting. If the chambers are available, if they aren't, I will be in touch or Karen will be in touch
Tomorrow.
right away. Okay, thank you.
Well, we haven't heard any kind of clap.
Okay.
That was a good date.
That's a great idea.
Good job.
No.
I'm gonna let the room settle down here for a second because we're ready to go to new business.
You didn't feel like you were going for it. So I'm not in the position to say it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it was a good solution.
Okay, our next application number ARB 23-36. The address is 217 North Stanwood. The applicant is Anthony Polina. The owner is Kate Qualman and Patricio Andrade. Sorry if I just botched your name. The applicant is seeking architectural review and approval and a certificate of appropriateness for a new front porch, a 3-season room, and a slate roof modification.
Yeah, 22.
If the applicant is here, please come forward and we will swear you in.
I'm the representative. I
You're
have
the
the paper. Yeah, I turned it all in, so.
No, they're off.
Sorry. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, in your testimony today?
Yes, ma'am. Wonderful.
Okay, what's your name, sir?
I'm Gerard Barden. I'm representative of the customer and the company Stoddard's Construction for 217 North Stanwood, so
Awesome, thank you.
no problem.
Can you, Karen, do you want to give us just a quick background
Yeah,
and
I'll
then?
give you- I'm sorry, I actually called somebody else about this today.
Anthony's the owner of the company. I'm his project manager and I actually live here in Bexley also, so.
Usually, I'd like to talk to everybody before the meeting, so you know what to expect.
Yeah, I came and I talked to Kathy Rose and I talked to a few people along the way. I didn't
No
know.
Surprises, but I mean, maybe
Sure.
for you. there'll be
It,
surprises,
a
but-
little bit. This was all a surprise. I wasn't expecting this tonight, but here.
So what the project, I mean, I think overall, I think I understand the intent and it is good.
Okay.
The front porch, I think is almost there. I did do in my staff report, I think it would really be great if you could. Sorry, I'm looking for my staff report. A little out of sorts now. Change the pitch of the entrance portico to better match the pitches of the existing roofs. I think it can be done pretty easily.
So,
I did it in a little green lines.
so we did do that originally. Part of the reason that we extended it the way that we did extend it to the sides, was for
The porch.
also for the reveal at the top. They have a keystone above their front door that they are really fond of, and they did not want to hide that or cover that up. So to try and open that up and make it more viewable, after we did our first set of renderings and plans with the engineer, the customer asked if we could widen that a little bit, because originally we did match the exact pitch. So absolutely happy to hear your recommendations, and if we need to bring it back, we can, but that's the reason that we ended up there, was to
I
kind of.
figured there was something like that. I was thinking it was the porch, so which is why I also kind of put on there, maybe you just do a little cover with some brackets that are typical of, you know, Tudor architectures.
Sure.
In terms, so I think that's all, you know, workable.
Okay.
In terms of the back, I'm don't think the drawings are very clear how the arbor, the trellis connects.
Okay.
Just kind of drawn. So we need to have a better understanding of how it connects.
Okay.
And also, I really question the window choices for the two sides, the little transoms.
Sure.
I'm sure there's something going on in the inside, but there wasn't a plan that was clear enough to understand
Sure.
what is going on in the inside. So
I can explain.
those are my comments, but
Absolutely. So the customer kind of made the decision on making the windows on the two sides smaller because of the sun exposure and the way that they use the room and when they use the room. And they felt like those big windows, especially because it's more of a 3 seasons room, it really heated the room up quite a bit. And so they were hoping to use smaller windows on those two sides to minimize the amount of that sunlight that they're getting. So that is why they moved to the smaller windows on those two sides on both of those there. Other than that, I mean, we certainly can reevaluate that and use windows that match the rest of it. But that was kind of at their request is
Okay,
why we went.
I need to go through board members, so
sorry,
it's
absolutely.
okay. Who wants to go first? Mr. Scott, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll take this one first. So front elevation first, please. I think the deck head joint's perfect. The fact that your roof is intersecting the second floor extension, I can't accept that. I think that roof has to either engage or encompass that in some way. I think that protruding through that roof for me at the front is kind of a really strange detail.
I'm not sure why it's in that coming through there, because the idea is that it doesn't actually protrude
You're
down.
gonna cut it, it's getting cut
Correct.
off.
It is going to get cut off there and then all flashed in around that roof there.
Okay, so that's good.
So I can have the
No,
architect just needs
that's-
to
as
change.
long as
the
it's on
drawing.
record, that's fine.
Yep.
It's not a huge deal. I do feel it is a little large, and I don't think making it a little thinner and a little shorter is gonna hide your keystone. I get that they want to kind of maximize the size of the porch, so I'm not saying it has to significantly reduce, but it does feel just a little large. I think in my comments to staff this week is it's really the rear and the level of overall quality. I get there's existing structures and things, but even in the photos, which are a little blurry, the details I think aren't being represented in the drawings well. So I think it's you're doing yourself a little disservice in the drawing.
I thought we had submitted some actual additional renderings as well through the website. I'm not seeing those come up here.
The ones with the trellis, I see that. But again, I think that there's really you have the white window frames over toward the end of
the photos.
No. So there's detail in that photo there's some detail in that.
Well, there's actual renderings too.
Yeah, it's at
I
the
have
end.
them in here. I just
Okay.
forget.
They're at the end of the no.
It was
It's the
it
one
was
that's
the very first,
The first one.
the first thing in the list.
There it is.
There you go.
Please.
So how this it's an existing structure, so I get it. So I'm trying to understand it, but I would love to have seen a little bit more detail on this extension. It just feels like it's a kind of a shed tacked on the back of the building.
Okay.
So just maybe it's a little bit more trim or a little bit more details at the kind of shed line and just to kind of clean it up. I don't have a problem with the change of the windows. I have more of a problem with the white windows and the dark facade, but
They actually already exist that way.
They
So
exist.
I'm not
Totally
changing
understand
the
that.
design. I'm basically taking what they have there and just kind of making it more livable for them. That back door currently isn't closed in, so they want to close that all in with that room. And just make it a more usable space all the way around for them. So I don't disagree with the styling of it. I think someone at some point thought it matched the Tudor on the front to go with the brown and the white. And so we just stayed with the existing.
Sure, and I get it.
Design.
So, and I understand that. So, and I think how the trellis interacts with the building, like, it looks like there's just kind of a ledger that this thing's getting applied. Is that? Is it the rendering representing the existing, or that's a change? That's a
So it
floating
is
one?
it is going to change. So it is existing there. He went through the process originally with you guys and did this a couple of years ago. And with this new change, he's actually going to have to take it down because we're moving the building towards it. And because we're now closing in that back door to the left there as well. So basically, we're going to be taking those two front posts that are closest to the house away and then removing, spreading the three of them across the front at the back of the property there. And then the house side will all tie in on the ledger board up against the house.
So, overall, I think the concept's fine. I get that what they're trying to do. It's not in a prominent position, and you're just enclosing kind of a dark cove anyway.
Correct.
To me, it's going to be in the details of the column bases, how those sit on the concrete, the connections of the trellis to the post, and having a little bit of architecture in that, and not just
Sure.
To me, that will help dress up that whole patio.
Okay. I do believe so. I didn't have a chance, and I know this was frowned upon earlier today. I do have some updated engineering drawings that I brought with me this evening that I got in my possession this evening. But I didn't have a chance to email them over. So I do have physical copies, and I planned on uploading those tomorrow. But I do have them here if anyone would like a copy of them here. They do address that a little bit more.
In past, I mean, unless it's overriding something that the board wants to see, a lot of times those details and things, if we're comfortable with the overall design, you can work with staff to kind of get through those. And if she's not comfortable, it'll come back to us. But
absolutely,
I'll let them explain that further. But
sure,
those are my main comments. Is just there's a lot in the drawings. There's not a lot of details. Your column and the extension of the trellis and things like that. There's just things that nuances and how. And there's design guidelines that we have issued. You've seen that?
Yeah, and
so there's some just recommendations on like how columns sit with capitals and eaves, and those. If you look at that and follow some of those details, it'll really kind of blend into the style of this house as well as the neighborhood.
Okay, I'll follow up with the architect and see if he can tweak those a little bit for us.
Mr. Heyer.
Just paint it black. I mean, I think it goes away. I mean, the striking thing about the renderings and what we're seeing here is that it's just like clear coated, pressure treated lumber. But if you paint it, it's going to go away. And I don't think the detail, I mean, I agree with Mr. Scott that there could be more refinement there, but just those renderings aren't doing it any good by showing it just as clear coated pressure treated wood. My concern is still I'm still trying to figure out how you do this front canopy. This house has a lot of character. The eaves, particularly, at the Tudor, stucco and timber portion, there's a particular detail to that, which I'm not seeing in Juliet's drawings. And Juliet Bullock did these drawings?
I'm sorry.
Did Juliet Bullock do the drawings for you?
Joel Burke.
Okay, never mind.
Burke did the
Sorry,
drawings.
sorry, Julie. I misspoke. But I just don't see how this. I don't see how this works. If you're going to if this front porch is going to be commensurate with the details of the house, there needs to be more sensitivity to the piers, to the way that the eave sweeps, or the rake comes and sweeps down. I think the little truss thing that you're doing it's just not of the same level as the rest of the house, to be honest. And then I don't know how you miss that, you know, what Mr. Scott was referring to, the second floor coming out. How do you miss that?
You actually don't miss it. So it's going to get trimmed off there is what's going to happen. It's kind of, it's dead space in the house up there. That's between a bedroom and a bathroom. There's nothing in that area. So we can cut it out and take the roof line right across it.
Which to me, I mean, that's where all the character is on this elevation, and you're just going to cut it off. That doesn't make sense to me.
Trying to accommodate the size of the patio that they wanted. It was originally smaller. The customer wanted it a little bit larger. The client did a little larger because with everyone having groceries delivered and everything at this point, there was no room for anyone to come up on their front porch or put anything on the front porch.
Do you know if the architect considered an option of shifting the porch off center of the door to allow that architectural detail of that to the right?
It was discussed briefly. The customer wasn't really thrilled with that idea, but obviously after we get some feedback today from the board, we can probably shift them more in those directions to make this work, for everyone.
It may change the shape of may change the way the roof, but
How much porch do they want? Because if they're looking to put chairs out there and a little table or something, is that what they're looking to do?
No, sir. Really more so than anything. It's just like, so when they have their groceries delivered or like when family comes, and obviously we have snow and rain here quite a bit. And so they just want people to be able to stand under the cover while they're waiting there at the front door, as well as be able to have packages delivered and things and be undercover on that front door. So they're hoping for like a 10x6. It was like, that's where we ended up after we kind of laid it all out with them. Originally, it was much smaller. Originally, it was actually like a 5x4, but that just didn't give them the coverage that they were hoping for. So we tried to expand it a little bit to give more of the coverage they're hoping for.
I really just think this is the wrong solution. Even, you could get coverage and you can do things asymmetrically that would work. I was even thinking that you might make it more elongated over the window to the left or something, create a real porch. But if they're not looking for that, there's got to be another solution instead of doing a gable. To me, it just doesn't work because you're taking away from the character of the front of the building by cutting off that projected gable, or the gable. There has to be another way to approach this.
Okay. So originally, again, we stayed with the same, slope of the existing roof, and we tried to match that detail at the top. We even had a stucco detail at the top, but again, that kind of started to cover up that keystone and that light that they had, and that's why
doing that in your rendering. I mean, you've got so much space in that rendering above that keystone.
And that's the second rendering, because we did move it up, and that was again at the customer's request. So we can work on bringing that back down and adding that element back in, or if we're recommending we go with completely different direction.
If you kept the peak where you have it.
Yes, sir.
And you change the slope like this, then your porch gets skinnier.
Correct.
But you already have the depth that you want.
Yeah, and that's the original design was much closer to what you're describing there, and they asked us to bring it out wider, but it's sounding like we're going to have to bring it back in, and that just may be what it is.
I
always shoot for the stars for my customers, but I'll bring it back to earth here.
Appreciate that. I just think that the other option would be to somehow, there's got to be a way to, instead of doing a gable that, maybe it's a shed, but it's resting on brackets of some kind. I mean, 6 feet is a long cantilever. This is a tough one.
Yeah. You don't get a whole lot of space between the edge of that house and the door there either, is the other issue that you run into quickly.
It's weird.
I got trapped. I mean, I'm trying to make the design work as best, because I absolutely understand. They also don't want to take away from the character. They love the front of the house, but they just wanted to add. And what you'll see, if you go down Stanwood, a lot of them have small fabric awnings, and it's just not the look that they're going for, and it doesn't offer them coverage.
Look, there's a ton of houses, especially in my neighborhood, where you have these. It's basically the house is a cube, and then they decided they were going to put this really steep gable thing at their front entry off center, and it just looks like it was stuck on there.
I'm very familiar.
Yeah, and so is that character, or is it just, does it look wrong? And what I'm afraid is that what you're doing here is not going to feel like character. It's going to feel like it's wrong.
Sure.
The challenge also is gonna be the detail around the door, that stonework typically isn't found under a porch. It's because it's a flat facade and they articulated that entry with that stonework to call out that entry. You typically don't see porches that work well.
I mean,
Yeah, we're trying
It
to.
can, and I think this is, the open porch is okay, but
why not do just,
that's why I said it would have been an approach if they had looked at that design to see if that was an option, because I think.
do a flat that has brackets that support it, you know, and no columns.
Oh.
No columns.
Well, I'd like to hear from. the
Yeah,
other guys,
sorry.
but, that's an option.
I'm stuck.
No, because it de-emphasizes the whole portion. It provides cover, but it doesn't compete with the main, there's one main feature on this elevation. It's that gabled roof. Stucco. Okay, I'll stop.
Anything else, Mr. Heyer?
No. Sorry, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Hall?
Yeah, just listening and trying to, I'm not really buying into cutting the, this overhang off, and kind of work this thing in. I think that's important. But I think it's possible to do some difficult. I don't think the answer is great, but the front door with the stone going around it, it's so close to the edge where that stucco.
It's right there. You're getting into that corner no matter what. Sure.
And the details get really messy and really funky really fast. If there's not some study really put into this. I agree with on the back, the rendering is open and adjusted, but I don't really have an issue with how that's changed.
Okay.
Mr. Steele?
You're not getting much coverage to that side of the door. If we have to stay out of that corner completely, then there's probably not much of an option for them to get the coverage that they're after, but
But, sorry, I mean, couldn't you just do something up here? That was cantilevered? You want the protection, but the extension is the problem. They want to go 6 feet out.
That's the issue that we've run into with everything is.
But you could do brackets that come back, like timbers that come back down.
Angle.
Yeah.
We were worried that started to also get into a different design than the rest of the house when you get into that, because
I mean, you have it here. You've got it here.
It would be at a different angle, but I think
It's going in the other direction, but it's the same language.
I think there's some merit there for sure. It's definitely worth, I'm happy to explore that option.
It would just be asymmetrical because you'd have a bracket here. You'd have a bracket here, and then potentially you could just do a third, and have it asymmetrical. Right?
It's just offset to the home, which, and that's fine. I think you're right there. Again, originally the vision, we were trying to work with the customer to what there was.
I understand.
But I just think that
The interesting aspect of that is it becomes an element of the gable piece. It would be an extension of that, right? Which is an interesting anomaly where it's different, it's unique, but it becomes something that plays with that object and is more of that than it is anything else to the house.
It's also making it more three-dimensional because everything here is flat.
Yes.
Right? And you bring the brackets out in the other direction, all of a sudden you've got more character and you really work those brackets.
And it's unique. It's not something that you typically
I-
see.
I think you're the designer.
I am a general contractor.
Okay. Tell your
no design credit.
tell your designer
Mhm.
that I think there's potential there for that.
Sure,
And
I will.
They can work on that.
I'll absolutely take that note back and we can work that out.
Okay, are you done?
Here?
And where would the brackets be?
Paint the whole thing black. That's easy. That's an easy sell.
Yeah.
Paint's easy.
I have a question about the back.
Yes, ma'am.
Right now, you have those big windows on all sides of the porch.
Yes, ma'am.
So why are you getting rid of them? Like,
So-
and putting in tiny windows?
So on that, what they're gonna do is they're actually gonna remove, I'm sorry. They're gonna remove the two windows from the side of the house and move those to the front wall because we're making that wall longer now. And the sun exposure from those two windows plays issues with them from the way they have that room set up with sunlight in that room.
But what it does is it makes that read as a porch rather than an odd building that was stuck on the back of their house. So all of those windows on that corner, to me, make it read much better than doing like a clear story window up there. So,
Okay.
I don't know why you would take that out. I mean, you could just do more windows like that on the side and pull shades down like you do now to control the sun.
Absolutely. and
That
was
looks 10 times better to me than what you're drawing of pulling those out and putting in the small clear story windows that match nothing else on the house. So-
that was the original design. Again, that was a customer request to switch, but I absolutely understand the feedback on the aesthetic and the way it looks. And I think that I can go back to the customer with that. And that's
Okay.
not going to be, that is not a hinge point for them. It was a hope, but I think you're absolutely right. We can still utilize those windows or that size of a window and use shades. They were just going to go to a smaller, non-movable window.
Yeah, even if the bottom panel of them was solid, that it wasn't glass, like
Sure.
it just makes it read like a porch and it's much better to me the way that it is than what you're changing it to. So,
Absolutely, not a problem.
okay, so, between the front porch and the back, I think we need to hear it again. So, if it's okay, we will ask for you to ask for it to be tabled to our next meeting, which would be, the second Thursday in January.
I don't get a special meeting? Come on. I feel like I'm just as special as everybody else here today.
We could do two that night.
No, that is.
Why
fine.
not?
It would be January 11th.
January 11th. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, does that sound okay?
That works for me.
We can do two in one night if you'll be the second one after that meeting.
I think I'll wait until
See you in
January.
January.
It's about the same anyways, I think. So,
Yeah.
We could still be here.
yeah, I sensed that. I told my wife I would maybe be home for breakfast tomorrow. So
Yeah. And see, you're gonna make it now.
I live right here, so it won't be bad. No.
Okay, so, is there a board member that will
Findings of
ask
fact.
for the,
We don't find, no, we don't find these effective.
No, he's asking to
That's table it, yeah, sorry.
yeah, is there a board member that will ask or request a table? And we will call the roll.
Mr. Hire,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Steele,
Yes.
and Madam Tony.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much. We'll
Thank
see
you.
you back here in
Have a good evening,
January.
everyone.
Okay.
With tonight.
Our last application for the evening is application ARB -37. The address is 2010 East Broad Street. The applicant is Brent Foley. The owner is the Catholic Diocese of Columbus. The applicant is seeking architectural review and approval and a certificate of appropriateness for expansions to the old gym and to add 2 stories and a variance from the height limit to allow the addition to match the height of the existing building. I personally think that's a little confusing, so we're gonna ask Karen to explain a little further. Yes, and we'll swear you in also.
Do you swear to tell the truth in your testimony tonight?
I do.
Yeah, it is a little confusing because there's actually a corresponding BZAP part of this. We are gonna have this as a recommendation to BZAP. The design is pretty straightforward. I think you've seen hints of it in the master plan, right?
Yeah, we actually got approval
That's what I thought.
over a year ago.
Okay.
Remember, for the first, we're actually coming back with the changes today.
The problem is that it is right on the border of the height that was requested to go back to BZAP. So we always err on the side of caution. So I'm gonna read verbatim Kathy's zoning comments. And then I can give my comments about the architecture, but St. Charles Master Plan was approved in 2021 with the conditions related to design and massing as followed. The site modifications, design materials will be in substantial conformance with the renderings and plans submitted at the Board of Zoning and Planning, which are right here, included here. Although that is very different than what, and I'm glad. Am I allowed to
We all
say
are.
that? Unless modified in collaboration with ARB and staff. So that's one issue. And this is a good overhead view, this aerial that shows the construction site. Everything in the black roof is the old gym, which that's where the addition will be on top of.
Both of those roofs?
Just the one.
This one.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. The applicant seeking design review and recommendation to BZAP. As there is a variance from Bexley Code 1254.10, which limits the maximum height to 3 stories or 45 feet to modify and build on the existing gym footprint and allow the addition to match the height of the existing structure south of the old gym, which has an overall height of 49 feet. This design of the new addition seems clear in its form, placement, and program. The applicant will have an opportunity at the meeting to discuss and explain the materials, differences between the rendering and the elevation, cornice, arches, details, etc. I just wanted to read that out loud because it was not what was on the agenda, but it was on the notice, so we're good. But I just want to make sure everybody understands why this is going to be that. Architecture. I have no problem with it. I do think we need to have some clarification on some of the renderings that show it without the cornice arches. We talked about this already today, so I will pass it on to you to fill in the gaps there and the board to make comments. And it doesn't look like we have anybody else left.
The quote of the evening is there's a month or two in the coming weeks, Mr. Hire. I think that was the quote. And I think we've had a month or two in this meeting tonight.
Only the amount of work for the architects. 2 months of work in 2 weeks.
So glad to be back in front of you guys. I think we're all a little slap happy at this point. Just to clarify, because we did get approval for this project. Well, I think it was the summer of last summer. And then we had come back because we made a little with some things on the other project, which we corrected. And because of that we actually submitted this application because there are some changes from what was submitted and approved back then that are on the application now. So I just want to make sure that's all clear and in the record. I was going to take you guys through the site plan. I don't think you need that. We guys know this project well enough. Maybe we just talk here first. So what is missing, this application or this rendering, you remember we produced specifically when we were looking at this here, and we had given the renderer, the information we had approved on this building in the background, but we really weren't paying attention too much to that when he did the rendering, to be quite frank. And so that's why the details of this don't quite match what's in the elevation. So what is intended is actually what's in the elevations, which do match the original application, which had the brick arch around the top of the building. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm a little tired. There we go. Yeah. So you can see this detail that's here around the building. So if you can go to the floor plans real quick, Karen, I want to say Kathy, and that wasn't right. I wanted to walk quickly through the changes. If you go back maybe to the first floor first. Wow. Well, you can start here actually. So 2 changes that you can note on this level from what was approved last summer. The stair that is here, it actually extended down pretty far down here previously, and we had a kind of a eureka moment, like, why are we making this giant stair when we could create a corridor to get back there? And so we changed the size of the stair just to be what's needed for the stair itself. And then we've created this inset here that was not in there previously. Originally, it was just around the perimeter there. And so that's one change that's also reflected on the elevations. Then if you go back to the one more, maybe 2 more. There you go. So, nope, sorry. We were there. So if you also recall, before we were achieving the ramp in here, and I think it was board member Scott who mentioned that we had a curved ramp and asked how that was going to work and all those things. If you remember that comment?
Oh,
yeah. We were able to incorporate the ramp into the interior of the building here now. And so now we have a very modest entrance here which we think is actually going to be a lot more appropriate and not mess with the architecture there. So that's the three things that's actually changed since the last time we're here. And I think we got the clarification on the brick arches. Just a note that last Friday, the bishop did announce publicly that St. Charles has the approval to move forward with this project. So we are excited that this is becoming reality. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, who wants to go first?
I will.
Mr. Scott.
I love the new ramp. I can see myself walking on that comfortably. Or I would have loved to have seen the curved, the circular ramp. That would have been, that would have been amazing. I think it's, I think the elevation, and it really is, for me, it's the elevation. I have no problem with the height. You know, this building's really complex. This mass is towards the back, at least off the street. You know, I don't have any problem with that recommendation. I'd love to see that you guys are doing the brick arches. I think that's appropriate. It's great. My only real comment is the large kind of glass window, which I think is new, right?
No, that was there. And
that is existing.
Yeah, what you had us do last time, this is actually Casey was representing us this time because I was out of state for a funeral. We did a little, these two sections here and here, where you guys asked us to move that off the face of the building so that there's a little bit of a reveal for this section. And in fact, we also raised the glass because originally it only came up this high. And I think that was Mr. Iyer's comment, to take the glass all the way up to the arch. Am I getting that right, Bill?
So yeah, please. I know I was part of that, but I didn't direct that. So
We wanted the architecture to the stonework that is around these two windows and these two windows. We wanted it to feel like it was natural, right? That you have a return here, obviously at the outside of the building, and then you have another little return here.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything in between was going to be glass. However, there is a stud wall that is right here, so you can't take the glass all the way to the edge. That's understandable. So, but you still have the return here, which is, I think, important. It would have been nice to get that all the way over, but I don't think that's, from my perspective, it's not a big deal.
okay. That's all I had.
Thank you.
So
I just think that we need to have clarification on what's really going on here. And, you know, the diagram that shows that we're going to match what's on the existing building by Kraus is, to me, it's not enough. I need to see what this is actually going to look like. Yeah, and actually, the way you're showing it here, it looks like it's going to be cast stone or stone, which honestly, I think would be better than trying to do it in brick, because I just think it's going to look.
Casey agrees with you. That's why I'm pointing to Casey.
It's going to stand out too much if you try to do it in brick.
We're very happy to go to cast stone. We'll make that change.
I'm sorry, for the banding or all of it?
Well, you're still going to have the detail and the shadow lines and the arches and all that, but it will be in cast stone.
All of it.
All of it.
Okay.
And then it lines up with what's on the other buildings, but you should also not project it. And I think this is just a Revit thing, but
probably, yeah.
Also the coursing, is this Aristone that you're using for your veneer?
We were looking at Aircraft as a product.
Aircraft,
yeah. Stone Sheets or Gridworks as the three products. Yeah.
But can you get the Aircraft? Can you get the coursing to actually work with?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can work through those details. Yeah.
And then what do you do for the head? Shouldn't you have an actual arched piece of
There's a discussion we had as well, and we landed on we landed on this, and in the end, we could explore that, you know, so that it has more like a true arch, is what you're saying, Bill.
Well, I'm just afraid that these windows are going to look like they were just simply punctured through an existing solid wall, instead of, you know, letting the Aristcraft, you know, work to create character on that surround. It doesn't have to be much. It could be, you know, a casing, but something that helps to.
You mean like a simple casing just around the top there?
Or you run it all the way around, or run it all the way up and down. That's a pretty common detail.
And it can be thin. It could just.
It could be 6-7 inches or something.
A little bit of a.
That's an easy solution, and it cleans it up too.
And then you have a sill, right? And you know, the casing comes down and sits on the sill. Because I just think this looks, and then the coursing should still do what you know, we're talking about you should equalize this so that the coursing ends at the spring point.
Yep.
And then continues up. You've already got a cutoff piece of stone up here anyway.
Yep.
So that is going to be more St. Charles character, because Kraus was a fanatic about all of his arches and his, you know, the details that work with that.
Yep.
And you know, from doing the convocation center, that brickwork with, you know, when you do bricks for arches, you have to have everything mapped out and everything absolutely correct. Here, you're not constrained by that, but you want to make it look like it was all meant to be. I just think this is a Revit thing, and, you know, this just needs to be refined more. That's all. So I'd like to see those details.
So cast stone coping, stone casing / sill, and then coursing at the spring point lineup. Got it.
Yeah, so that it all looks settled and more refined. That's all. Those are my only comments. I have no issue with the size. The interior and the entryways looks great. So that's all I have.
Mr. Hall.
My only going on the arch opening, how the joints in the masonry really weren't lining with joints and the windows. Other than that, I like the idea of changing the top of the building to yes, I think that's going to be easier.
It'll be a lot easier for our contractor will be happy too with that.
Yeah.
So they're much more,
Making them up.
informed about how you got to where you are. So I'm gonna lean on them a little bit for that too.
Thank you.
My first read.
And after following these guys, I have nothing to add. I think it's great. So
Those 3 clarifications, just to make sure I'm clear, the class stone coping.
Wait, say it again. I have
3,
2.
the top goes to cast stone coping, and the whole coping becomes a cast stone rather than brick. Same detailing. We do a stone casing and sill around the windows, and then we line up the coursing so that the stone is at the spring point of the arch.
and then will your big window mullions adjust to the cape to the
Yeah,
casings on the-
likely, and I don't know why that one's not
And a little bit more attention to the bottom of the big window. It seems like there's a little sliver.
Yeah,
I just think it's a little bit, it just feels like it was a rectangle of put in there.
might be again
It's
another
centered, but
modeling error. Yeah,
no doubt.
yeah.
I get it.
What is nice is that is right up against that multi-purpose. If you remember the building, there's a whole other, there was that second black mass, that roof is right there. And so you actually never will see most of that from anywhere. Yeah.
Okay, so the
Thank you.
findings of fact are basically what you just read.
Have them all.
Are we asking for it to come back, or is this the
I think these are details that the design consultant will share with us.
I can, if you send me the details, I'll just send you guys an email.
Perfect. Works for us.
It's a recommendation to these out. Yes, it is
Yes.
a recommendation to these out.
Okay, so that's what you're asking for as a recommendation
Yes,
to be
please.
set? Yep. Okay, and we understand the findings of fact are started as 3, but really ended up as, I think, 4 different things that you
Yeah, I got them all.
read out. Okay. Is there a board member that will make a motion?
so moved, Scott?
A second higher.
All right, Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Hire,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Steele, Adam Tony.
Yes,
Thank
you
you.
are approved. Thank you for your patience.
You were the only one tonight.
We win. Catherine, good to see you.
We are adjourned.